Okay, be with people in 1 minute. Check, check, check. Okay. The sound seems to be working. What are you doing, Annabelle? Apologize for the light. For some reason here in PA we have sun out today, which is been an irregularity. So I will try to be leaning back. What's up, Jay? Good to have you on. I'm going to give it a couple minutes and then start. I basically only have a couple subjects to talk about today, but I could go for hours on it if need be. I don't know how long it'll be, but I got to remember to lean back. I keep getting this sun in my eye. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Oh. No. Okay. Yeah, I know. Only a couple people here. That's okay. Normally I'll have, on these live streams, I've had, like, on average, I'd say 5 or 6 people watching at once, which I'm more than happy with. And actually, not a lot of people watch these live videos in retrospect. But I don't care if even 1 or 2 people are watching. That's good enough for me. I just enjoy talking about stuff. And the truth is, I'm a sad, boring man when my wife's at work. I work block shifts, so I do, like, Sunday night until Wednesday afternoon. I'm there 24/7. So then I have Thursdays and Fridays off, and my wife's usually at work. She works at a bank. So I just kind of sit here with nothing to do. Like, I'm either reading or I've been watching the show Black Mirror. That's what I got up to today, which was really enjoyable. Or I'm looking up, stuff to post on Above Top Secret or just news stories and stuff like that. That's about it, though. So, yeah. So, as much for my own amusement, I do these live streams as anything else. So, today, the majority of what I wanted to talk about was the wall and the shutdown. And then I might segue into just civility in politics, things like that, and humor, which almost seems like opposite, because there's this idea that if you're having crass humor that you're being uncivil. I don't necessarily think that's the case. So, that's basically what the show has in store for us today. So one of the things that was relatively new is I actually had some Facebook people share videos of mine this week, which was kind of new because I think the wall is something that people really on all sides, because I'm kind of friends with 2 different groups of people, kind of the rural Pennsylvania group of friends I have that are on Facebook, and then the people I met through debate that are, generally speaking, most of them live in cities and they're very progressive left wing. And so I got, like, on my Facebook feed, I rarely talk about politics other than just putting a link to my videos up there, but you kind of get to see the extremes of both sides, the people that really want the wall and the people that really hate the wall. So I actually had people posting some of my stuff. And as a result of that, I had people asking me questions on there, which makes talking much easier. Yesterday, for example, I did a show on my friend Drone Tech's channel, which I'll actually put a link to here at some point in the show. I'll put it in the chat when I got a moment. You should check his channel out. He does a really great job of illustrating hypocrisy in the media and just when they're being stupid, which is, I think, one of the most important things we could do. Basically, whether we want to admit it or not, we're kind of alternative media. Any of us that are doing YouTube channels or even that are reporting things like on a website like Above Top Secret or just Facebook or anything of that matter. Like when you report on the news or give your opinion on it, you're being as much as you're having as much of an influence. Well, I don't want to say that. You're doing exactly what the mainstream media is doing. So, yeah, it's incumbent on us. Like, it's very important for him particularly and other people that are alternative media people to kind of point out why exactly the mainstream media is a joke. So I did this show with him yesterday, and it's way easier to talk when you have someone asking you questions. So if anyone has anything they want to ask or any points they want to make in the chat, that would be great. But I had a couple friends of mine ask me questions, so I'm basically going to go through, I'll start off going through those questions. I also did a video, a Q&A on my video I did on globalism, and I kind of answered some questions on that too, and I like that format. It makes it easier for me to talk. So where are we with the wall and the shutdown today? So there's a couple things that's worth talking about at the top, which is, regardless of what I say from here on out in the video or any of my videos, regardless what you hear from anyone, whether they be mainstream media, someone on the left, someone on the right, a border patrol agent, anyone involved in Congress, a mainstream media person, your mom, it doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you that this is the absolute truth. This shutdown is both sides' fault. Period. And the reason I say that is the Democrats could any minute say, Trump, we cave into all of your demands. Let's end the shutdown. Trump could at any minute say, Democrats, we cave into all of your demands. End the shutdown. Now, you could argue, as I will, which side's more at fault. That's perfectly reasonable. And you could say if one side's grossly more at fault, then that's what we should be focusing on. Totally reasonable as well. But it is both sides' fault if you're looking at it truly objectively, at least on some level. And I say that because when you see then all of these people get on a moral high horse and they say things like, Mr. Trump, look at all these people that are out of work thanks to you, thanks to the government shutdown. Food stamps might be running out. You're inhumane. You're a monster. Then you should at least give some of that blame to the Democrats as well, because they're at least partially responsible. The idea that that is such a moral, because the way these people are making it, they're making it a morality argument. And when they do that, they're saying everything should be put aside because this issue is the most moral. But if you're only directing that, and this is true for the people that are making these types of arguments and only blaming the Democrats, if you're making that type of argument, you have to understand that what you're really saying is, and you're not blaming both sides, by the way, what you're really saying is then, I think that the issue that my side has is worth fighting for and is worth having the government shut down. So I only blame the other person and blame them moralistically for the shutdown. And that's why these types of moral arguments, I think, are ridiculous. Now, I also understand the necessity for these type of moral arguments. I think one of the areas that the Republicans get trounced by the Democrats is they allow the Democrats to spin everything as a matter of morality based on emotion. And the Republicans are very poor at fighting back in that sense. So, for example, Republicans will say things like, well, look, pragmatically, we can't have open borders because if we did, we would never be able, if we issued all these policies that a progressive like Bernie or Cortez would want, we would basically end up with unlimited borders with free healthcare for everyone. And we'd run out of resources or we would go bankrupt, immediately. So pragmatically, it doesn't work. But the counter to argument to that you'll hear from them is, you're a monster. You don't care about poor people. What a horrible, evil thing to do. This is a politics of fear. And so a lot of people, if you're just a casual observer, you're going to be more persuaded by the emotional argument than you are by the pragmatic argument. And so there is a need in politics, sadly, to be able to make any argument you make fit both of those criteria, both why it makes sense pragmatically, but also to appeal to emotional side too. I hate that. I wish that, there's always going to be appeals to emotion, and not even just in politics, in any persuasion. But I would hope that we don't abuse that and focus on that. And sadly, that's what we see happening. And the right's starting to do it too. That's one of the things I wasn't a huge fan of in Trump's speech was when he's talking about all the specifics of the illegals committing all these murders. Like, that's fine. I don't mind him saying that. But that's no different than the Democrats saying, look at these poor children that died in cages. Like, all of that is exemptions to the rules. And it's fair for both sides to bring it up, but, you know, for every story you have of, the left saying, here's a child that died in a cage, the right will say, here's an angel mom who had a child die by an illegal immigrant. And it's designed to tug on your heartstrings instead of looking at things pragmatically, which then once, it becomes this argument of deontology versus utilitarianism. These are basically political philosophies on how we should act. Or not just political, by the way, just philosophies in general on how we should act. Utilitarianism, in a nutshell, says the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. Deontology says that we should have a moralistic code and act upon that. That should drive our actions, and it shouldn't be a matter of the greatest good for the greatest number. So you look at how this plays out in the real world. Like, you have questions of, remember the movie Swordfish, which wasn't a bad movie. Hugh Jackman plays like a computer hacker, and John Travolta plays this terrorist, but he's a good terrorist, I guess. And his idea is that him and his terrorist group work for the U.S. government. If a terrorist attack us, then they kill 10 times more of that terrorist people in return. And the idea is that'll make the idea of terrorism so repugnant that no one will do it. And so he has this speech in it. He was like, how many people would you kill to cure AIDS? 10, and he's like, what about 1,000? What about 100,000? Right? And that's the idea of utilitarianism. Would you take that you have the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Deontology would say, a utilitarian might say, yeah, you kill one person to save 1 million from cancer or from AIDS. A deontologist would say, no, you don't do that because it's always wrong to kill people. Now, the truth of the matter is, you can't use either of those systems in the extreme. Like, for example, in utilitarianism, what is the greatest good? Like, you have to, it becomes confusing how you define things like that. But you always have to act with some morality, or you don't get to the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And conversely, with deontology, if you're just focused purely on the individual, then you could cause all sorts of damage that you could see that would obviously consequentially happen to a large number of people. For example, you would say to a deontologist, let's say China murders one of their citizens. How far are we willing to go to intervene in that murder? Are we going to go to war? Questions like that, just for one citizen. So there obviously has to be a mix that comes about in the side. Another great example that's one of my favorites is I've never seen the movie, but the graphic novel of The Watchmen, right? Basically, the idea is, I forget his name now, but the villain, Alexander or whatever, he sets up the situation where he's basically going to kill a bunch of people by making it look like aliens attack major cities around the world. But his reasoning for doing that is he knows that the world's going to blow itself up in a nuclear exchange if we don't have an exterior enemy. So he's willing to sacrifice 1 million people to save the world. Rorschach, when he finds out about this plan, is just like, no, I refuse to accept that. You're still killing millions of people. That's still wrong, period. That's the best in literature I've ever seen it play out, in my opinion. But it's a really good debate. So you end up with these emotional appeals, which is kind of more of a sense of deontology, where people are saying, we have to look at this emotionally. And I think it clouds judgment. Sometimes you don't look at pragmatically how we should be taking steps to solve things. So, if just because you have one... For example, you end up doing with all kinds of crazy consequences when you're trying to act based on emotion and out of a sense of moral justice. For example, it's really crappy when people come over the border to detain their children in these cages, right? When you're detaining the families, if you put the children in there, well, technically you have children in with adults, then that's a really bad thing. So the Ninth Circuit Court under Obama said, yeah, you can't house children with adults while they're being detained at the border. So they put them in a separate area. Now the outrage is, look at these kids in cages separated from their family. But what's the answer? Do you put them back with the families then? Well, then we're right back to where we started, where the Ninth Circuit was like, well, that's humane. You can't have children in with adults. God forbid. And we know that some people crossing the border pretend that these children are theirs. God forbid that you put a child in a facility housed with someone who's trying to take advantage of them, a human trafficker or something like that. So, there's either way, it's a difficult situation. What's the alternative? And the alternative is what you see a lot of Democrats say, or people that support the Democrats say, is we should just let them go. Like, just let them get into the U.S. and then later we'll figure out what to do with it. Well, that's a terrible idea. Again, what if it's a human trafficker and it's not really their child? So there's no easy answer to any of this. But when you just make that appeal to emotion, you just say, nope, can't house the kids with children, or can't house children with adults. Okay, well then you've led to another moral crisis. And we could see all sorts of things like that occur all the time. So this idea that the Democrats, and I do think that both sides play this game, but certainly it's more common for the left to play this game than the right. And I'm reading a book right now called The Coddling of the American Mind. It's by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukow, I think is how you pronounce his last name. It's a fantastic book. I really recommend it. And they're looking at the idea of PC culture and universities, and how universities are basically now just monolithically left-wing places. It's something like, they give all sorts of statistics, but particularly in the fields of like the humanities and schools like that, it's something like, 90%, 95% dominated by left-wing people. That's just the teachers. The administration's just as bad. They talk about a study, I believe in that book, but I've also seen him talk about this elsewhere, and I've talked about it in the channel before, but just to illustrate the point, they took thousands of people and they gave them these surveys, and 1/3 of the time they filled out the survey as they are, like they filled out how they would as people. 1/3 of the time they were asked to fill it out as they thought a Republican would fill it out, and 1/3 of the time as a Democrat. I don't know if it used the words Republican or Democrat or left, right wing or left wing, but you get the idea. And what they found was that there is a difference, but the survey would be questions like, they were phrased like, you see a homeless man on the street, what do? Do you give him money? Do you help him find a facility to get a job? Things like that. And they were also like, you ignore him. Things. So the Republicans and Democrats both had different opinions on this. And what they found was that the Republicans were able to quite accurately, when they were filling out the survey as a Democrat, they were pretty close to what the actual Democrats said they would do. But when the Democrats were filling out the survey as to what the Republicans would do, they basically had no idea. They always just picked the most evil choice, basically. So it would be like, step over the homeless man and don't do anything, etc. The Republicans, in effect, and what this is showing was, they were like, yeah, we understand the left wing disagrees with us. We understand where they're coming from. We just think that pragmatically, that's not the best solution. But the Democrats' view of the Republicans was basically, they're scummy, evil people. Now, again, certainly this happens on both sides, but I think that the evidence shows that this happens much more on the left. And when you have that sort of argumentation, it basically quells all discussion, because you're not going to have a serious discussion with someone you think's evil, or if they're advocating a position you think's evil. I could have a discussion based, like, imagine how this would go the other way. Like, let's say we're talking about tax policies. I think that a lot of taxation is theft. I saw Penn from Penn and Teller say this best once. He said that if you should not demand taxes paid for something if you're not willing to hold a gun to someone's head and demand the money for that. Because that's basically what taxation is. It's the use of force to comply the handing over of money. You have the government's guns basically on your back saying, you will give us that money. It's compelled. And Penn says that he feels that it's unethical to ever compel that to people. Now, if Penn then said, let's say then we're taking that interpretation and we're having any argument on taxation. And so the left goes, actually, we need money for infrastructure, social safety nets, the military, all sorts of things like that. So we want to increase the taxes 1%. And the Republicans were just like, you are immoral and evil. What's the debate on that going to look like? What's the discussion? There is none, because the Republicans would say, we're not going to negotiate with evil people. And that's, this is a roundabout long way of saying this. That's exactly what we're seeing on the border policy. And that's why I blame the Democrats more than the Republicans. Because the leadership of the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, not only is she obviously the leader of the Democrats at this point, but she's also the leader in the only branch that the Democrats control, which is the House. She isn't just saying the wall will be ineffectual, or that it costs too much, or that they have another plan. She's saying that it's immoral. And that means there is no negotiation. Trump at least is attempting to have some sort of negotiation. Now, you might think it's buffoonish or ineffectual. Again, that's fine. But you see that Trump's, like, he's had meetings with him where he's like, are we going to talk about giving any money for the wall? No. Okay, bye-bye, he says. He says, oh, they started to come out and say a concrete wall would be bad and too expensive because border agents wouldn't be able to see through the wall. Okay, well then we'll switch it to a slat. He's clearly at least attempting to make overtures that's like, I'm willing to move somewhat on this issue. But the Democrats can't, because Pelosi's saying it is immoral. So if you can't negotiate with immorality. You can't give half the money for an immoral project. And so that's what the stalemate's over. And strategically, Pelosi has to say it's immoral because the secondary arguments that other Democrats are making aren't going to stand up to scrutiny. The best argument the Democrats have, and this should appeal to the right wing, is fiscal responsibility. And so the idea is the wall costs too much. It won't be effectual enough to be worth the cost of building the wall, would be the argument. The problem is, if we look at in context with how much it would cost, I mean, obviously $5 billion is a lot. That's what he's asking for now. That's a lot of money. But if you look at it contextually with what else we spend, I mean, the Democrats are spending something like $50 billion on giving aid to other countries to stop these countries that we're talking about that have people fleeing them trying to come across the southern border. That's $50 billion to help their country, but they won't provide $5 billion to help ours. Also, the budget, I think last year was something like $4.47 trillion. So if you do the math, the numbers are so big, it's hard to comprehend. But if you take that $4.4 trillion and like as the budget of the U.S. or the income of the U.S., we'll say, let's make that a little more understandable. Let's say that that was actually $40,000, which is something that a normal person might make. So the percentage of $4 trillion to asking for $5 billion is the same of the percentage of $40,000 someone who makes spending $500. So think if you make around $40,000, or if at any point in your life you made that, like $500 is a reasonable chunk of change. You're not just going to throw it on anything. But you'll probably spend much more than that in your cable bill, all sorts of things that you don't think are a huge necessity because, it's not that much money. You're willing to spend that much. And we are talking about something that's important. Supposedly, the Democrats say that border security is important. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't really buy their fiscal responsibility arguments because I don't think $5 billion is that much out of the budget when you look at it contextually. And certainly the Democrats aren't the people to be discussing fiscal responsibility when they have, literally, you could look sometime at the item, like they'll fund millions of dollars for like research on all kinds of crazy stuff they'll fund. Like when you would add all that up, you'd be talking billions of dollars. Foreign aid, tons of things that the Democrats are advocating spending the similar amounts of money or more on. But all of a sudden when it comes to border security, it's like, no, we can't afford that. So I don't buy the finance argument. The other argument's just that the wall's ineffectual. And this comes in all kinds of, unbelievable. Like, for example, one of the big pushes is, did you see that they could saw through the steel slats? Did you see that? Oh my goodness. What good is that? Well, first off, the sawing through, like, used power tools, it's going to be pretty tough to get power tools if you're fleeing. It'll be difficult to get them. Second, it still would take a lot of time. And third, no one's saying the wall would solve everything. They act like when it's like put up a wall that Trump will build the wall and then be like, okay, border agents, go home. No need for other tech, no need for border agents. We got a wall, that's it. No, of course not. The wall's there to buttress the defense we already have. So what do you think would be more likely to get around? And you hear Pelosi say things like, they would just build tunnels under them. What do you think's more likely to get illegals across? Just walking through an open field or open desert, or having to build a tunnel or saw through? Meanwhile, while they're building the tunnels and sawing, don't you think Border Patrol agents have a far better chance of catching them during that time than if they just have to walk through something in the night? And if that's the argument, then I could also make easy arguments to be like, well, actually, it's easy to avoid border agents, too. All you have to do is watch the way they're... Like, has anyone ever played Metal Gear? You can avoid patrols, no problem. Just study the way they're going, Put a cardboard box on and sneak through or whatever. Drones, the same thing. Clearly I'm being a little silly, but you see what I'm saying. Are we saying, well, if there's ways to avoid them, there's no sense investing? Is that really the argument? Okay, then why have border agents at all? Why have drones at all? Now, you might make the argument, well, wait a minute, border agents and drones would be more effective than the wall. Maybe, but I'm not an expert. I can't claim that. But I do know that when we look what the border agents say, the majority of them say, yes, the wall's a great idea. It'll help us. And this includes Obama, the person that was in charge of the border under Obama for 6 months. Trump let him go. The reason Trump let him go was he felt there was a feeling that this person wasn't advocating for border agents enough. Even that guy's came out this week and was like, Trump needs to continue to press this issue. It is crucial to the safety of this country. There is a bad situation occurring, and we need to build this wall. That's even the person under Obama saying that. And we see all sorts of border agents when they're asked. Most of them say, like, yeah, we want a wall. I saw a report on NPR, right, which was saying, which NPR is certainly not big fans of Trump, about as left-wing as it comes. And they interviewed border agents around San Diego, and the border agents were saying, look, we have a wall here already, but when we improved that wall to more to like what Trump's suggesting now, we now have 90% control over the border of people coming across, and that's a huge improvement. And what it does is, not only is the wall effective, but it also allows us to spread our manpower elsewhere and be more effective there as well. And the NPR people admit, they're like, yeah, and there's grossly a need for manpower at the border, more border patrol agents. Now, the NPR tried to spin it as like, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's just one area, San Diego. So what the San Diego agents are saying, like, yeah, we've seen how it could be successful here, and we think it should be like that across the rest of the border. Now, Trump gets hyperbolic. Do I think that means literally a wall in places that would be almost infeasible to put a wall? No. But we could use our best judgment. What he's saying is basically we want a physical barrier the entire length. And that's basically true. That's what we do want. In areas where it would be near impossible to put that physical barrier, or it'd be worthless because the natural state of things like a sheer cliff that acts as a wall anyways, or there's waterways or something that you can't get the wall up. Yeah, okay, I get that. Right? So you could make the argument that Trump is technically incorrect in his language, saying wall the entire 1,600 miles or whatever the length is. But what he is saying is to build it in the areas we have now that it's totally feasible. And I agree with him. And we see examples of this all the time. The Democrats, like, I did a video, which I think's worth checking out. Of course I do, because I did the video, right? But it's about CNN's Como accidentally admitting that the wall actually works and that the Democrats are ridiculous for opposing it. And what he says is, basically, I'll give a rundown, though it's worth checking out to see his own words. He says, I just want to tell the American people, basically the exact type of barrier or wall or whatever you want to call it that Trump's suggesting already exists in a lot of the border. And the border agents say it's successful and they want more of the wall. And the Democrats voted for those portions of the wall. And Trump's wall is almost the exact same as what they're suggesting. But the Democrats will never give Trump this new wall. And he tries to spin it like it's Trump's fault. Like he's saying, like, Trump thinks he came up with this idea, but it's not his idea because it was already there. So in Como's head, you can actually see him like he's actually articulating exactly why this is the Democrats' fault, the shutdown, and how hypocritical they're being. But because he's so anti-Trump, he's in his head, like he's twisting it to be like, but somehow this is Trump's fault. And he's absolutely right. What he's telling you there is, yes, this wall is basically, now that we're talking about the steel bollards and the steel slats, is basically the exact same as what the Democrats have already voted for and pushed. Yet they're not just saying it's ineffectual, they're saying it's immoral. If someone votes for something one day and then doesn't the next, you would say, whoa, that's a flip-flop, what's up with that? But when they vote for something one day and then the next day say not only are they not voting for it, but it's immoral to vote for that, then you know they're liars. And there is only one explanation why they would do that. And that's because Trump suggested it. They care more about hurting Trump and not allowing him to get a win than they care about border security or about the people affected by the government shutdown. Period. Because they told you it's not about, is the wall going to be effective or not? It is, the wall is immoral. That's what Pelosi, the leader of the Democrats, said. It is immoral. So my question is, why hasn't anyone been like, wait, what? Like, and nailed down on these questions? Well, I know why, because the mainstream media is a joke. And Pelosi would never, I would love to interview Pelosi. I'd be polite. I would, you know. But, you know, the first question I would say is like, explain to me exactly why a wall is immoral. What makes a wall immoral, but the barrier we already have up? Like, I love this semantic game. Like, this is played over and over. And Trump's guilty of it as well, somewhat. because he told his constituents he wanted a wall, so he has to keep using the word wall. Are steel slats like that a wall, or is it a fence, or is it bollards? I don't know. I don't care. The barrier, the idea of having a barrier like that is good enough for me. I don't care what term we use it. We saw this, like, these semantic arguments, and this is, what my degree in was speech communication. So I'm well aware of the importance of semantics. But it's very interesting if you pay attention how people try to, particular politicians, but all sorts of people will try to use definitions and vocabulary and semantic arguments to twist things to fit in a neat box to kind of prove their point. Like, for example, the entire debate did the FBI send spies into Trump's team? No, they weren't spies. They were clandestine officers reporting on Trump's campaign activities in secret to the FBI. Yeah, that's a spy, basically. You could change the language because you don't want the average person that's watching to know. Because you understand, the only reason you're trying to change the language is you understand, wow, the average person's going to be like, that's really crappy that the FBI was spying on Trump's campaign. That's really crappy. So you have to be like, no, it wasn't spying. They didn't send spies. And then they go on to articulate some definition of something else that ends up, or some semantic argument that basically is, yeah, it was a spy. It's the same way here. Like, I don't care if the Democrats want to be like, somehow, I guess, no one's asked Pelosi, but she would call what's already there bollards or a barrier or a fence, and that's morally acceptable. But there's something immoral about Trump's bollards or fence or wall or whatever you want to call it. So I would like to ask Nancy, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I should say Pelosi. Should give her some respect, even if I don't feel she's deserved it. Respect the office somewhat, I guess, right? But I should ask Pelosi, what is immoral about the wall? Can you articulate exactly about Trump's proposal right now that you're saying is immoral? Can you articulate what is immoral about it? Because she didn't say he wants it for immoral reasons. That's not what she said. She said the wall is immoral. The policy is immoral. Okay, well, what is it? What is it about it that's immoral? And until she explains, this is my extrapolation of what she's saying. Because keep in mind, she said the fence that she voted for before was immoral. The foreign aid she's given to countries like Jordan to build walls, she said that was moral. So the fence she voted for on the border, or the barrier, whatever the heck you want to call it, that's moral. The Jordan barrier wall that she voted for, that's moral. Israel's wall is moral. It's just Trump's wall that's immoral. So what is the difference between his wall and the other walls? I don't see it. I don't understand what the difference is. What I take it is she's dog whistling saying that it's racist. The idea of keeping a barrier, and the reason I believe this, it's not just I'm pulling this out of my butt, is that because they then say, oh, it's because we should be more about the Statue of Liberty than a wall. And it's a politics of fear. And so what they're saying is, look, the idea of keeping the others out. And then you heard like what people on CNN said, like Rick Wilson, that they all chuckled about, right? The idea is, oh, Trump supporters and Trump, they just want to keep the brown hordes out. That's what they're alluding to. Oh, the wall's just about keeping brown people out. It's about keeping other people out. And that's immoral. Okay, if that's how you feel, then how isn't all border security immoral? And what this is it's another, and what they're really saying is the same argument you hear them make over and over. They say that the double standards are okay because they're good people and Trump and his supporters are bad people. It was why the phrase "Make America Great Again" is racist. But then when you could play clips of Bill Clinton saying "Make America Great Again," they were like, oh, that's not racist. It's why they could make racial arguments all the time about whatever groups they want, but then anytime anyone else does, it's racist. It's why they can insult, you could have Joy Reid insulting, having homophobic tweets or whatever. That's okay, but anyone on the right can't. It's these constant double standards, and the idea is it's not actions that are moral or immoral. It's everything is subjective to based on what your political ideology is. And this goes back to the idea of cultural Marxism and intersectionality, where you're not an individual, you're just the groups that you belong to. I talk about this all the time, but we see this has become a major platform of the Democratic Party. So I'm not Rob Noor, I am what is my race? I'm that group, so I'm white. What is my gender? Male. What is my sexual orientation? Straight. What is my ability? I'm not disabled, you know, native U.S. citizen, things like that. Those are all in the oppressors category. Now, I might have some things that are going for me oppressed. I'm overweight. I'm oppressed because I'm overweight, right? Not necessarily the most attractive man in the world. But, you know, hey, that might put me in the oppressed category. It's almost better to be unattractive at this point because then you can claim the victimhood, right? Anyways, you get the idea. I've talked about this before. But the number one most important thing that overrides any of that is the only way it applies is if you have the correct ideology. So even if you fit into all the oppressed groups, you know, you're a black, lesbian, transgender, disabled person. If you have a conservative ideology and you're like, yeah, I don't buy into this cultural Marxism crap, then you lose all of your oppressed status and you don't gain any of the benefits from it. And now you're a terrible person. In fact, not only are you terrible, you're worse than just the oppressor type people. That's why they go after people that leave their side even more, like Kanye West. And so what they say is, as long as you have the correct politics, as long as you have the correct ideology, then you could do the same actions that you would criticize on the other sides, and it's totally fine and it's moral. So in that way, the Democrats are saying border security, if we suggest it, is moral, but if Trump suggests it, is immoral and racist. That's what they're saying. That's how, in their minds, I truly believe they're justifying, like, yes, this wall is immoral. But Ms. Pelosi, isn't this the exact same type of wall you already voted for in the past? Yeah, that was different. Well, what was different about it? We wanted it. That's what was different. And so now they've totally shut down the government. They can't negotiate at this point. They're basically saying Trump's idea is racist. Would you negotiate with racism? Yeah, we'll go for half racism. And if the wall is immoral, and we're talking about budgetary concerns, I've yet to see Pelosi put forth her plan for how much is it going to cost to rip up the immoral wall sections we already have there. Or bollards or fencing or whatever you want to call it. We don't know. It's just such a stupid argument. If they made the argument that the wall isn't effectual or it would cost too much, at least I could say, like, all right, there's a difference of opinion. Let's talk about it. Let's look at the facts of it. But they didn't make that argument. And so they're saying that it's immoral. And then, here's another example of the ineffectual argument why it's stupid. You probably read the story today that CNN requested this local San Diego news outlet send someone on to talk about what border agents think about the wall there. They requested this. So this news outlet was like, cool. Most of these border agents really support the wall because they know it works. And CNN said, no, thanks. We don't want your opinions now. Because they're not real journalists. Do you understand? When they kick and moan and scream about, the president made fun of Jim Acosta. He kicked him out of a press briefing because he was acting like a child. That's terrible. Trump's attacking the freedom of the press. And the press is the cornerstone of American democracy. And it saves our country. It is how the country gets informed. When they say things like that, they're so full of it. Because they're not legitimate press. If they were legitimate press, they wouldn't be acting as propagandists. And you see when the true colors come out, that legitimate press is like, oh, what do people on the borders think? Oh, they don't think what we think? Never mind, then don't give them airtime. You saw Jim Acosta make a fool of himself, go down to the wall and say, oh, I'm here at the wall, I don't see any illegals. Yes, exactly. It's just, it's nonsense. And we know it. So they can't make the argument. I've already articulated why it's absurd for them to try to make the spending argument. And Trump, by the way, Trump could have done a lot better on this. Like Trump's speech, he should have just came out and been like, here's things the Democrats have spent $5 billion on and listed them off, all the nonsense that they've spent money on and been like, they think all those more issues are more important than border security. Period. Does that sound reasonable to you? So the Democrats can't, with a straight face, make the, financial, what's the word I'm looking for? Prudency argument that it costs too much. And they can't make the effectual argument because they know they're losing at that. I've said since day one that the opposition to the wall is because people are afraid that it'll work. Because both the establishment Republicans and Democrats like illegal immigration. The establishment Republicans like it because it's cheap labor for the people, the lobbyists that pay for them to be in power. The establishment Democrats for the same reason and because they know that at some point down the road it might lead to votes for them. And I think there are some, not all, but I do think there's an idea of evil white men, let's replace demographics. And when you hear Cortez say, oh, the people trying to get in the border are acting more American than Trump supporters. Like, that's the idea. When you see Rick Wilson say that Trump supporters are toothless or 10-tooth racist, and everyone on CNN just laughs. That's what those people feel. You can see in the moment, at least those people. Again, I'm not saying all Democrats. I'm not saying to my Democratic friends, a lot of them I know, that I know this isn't the case. And even when talking, if I was talking to someone, I would try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I know there are people that believe that. And so they want illegal immigration. That's what the rejection to it is. They're afraid that the wall might work. Because when you talk to the people that would know, the Border Patrol, they say, yes, the wall would work. It has in the past. Will it work 100%? No. Are there other problems, like problems with illegal immigration and drugs and terrorism, etc., coming through legal ports of entry? Yes. Are there problems with people overstaying their visas? Absolutely. Yes, all of that is simultaneously true. But this would go a long way to solving a problem at the southern border. Now, let's start. There's a couple other things to start with that. And again, right, like security starts with the barrier. That's exactly it. It's not the end all be all, but it's the beginning of it. And like I heard Tucker, one of his guests, they were talking about walls, and Tucker mentioned prison walls. And the guy was like, well, yeah, the prison walls work because there's, security around the walls and cameras and stuff. Yes, exactly. No one's suggesting that the southern barrier wouldn't be like that. In the places we already have wall, guess what? There's still Border Patrol agents. There's just this kind of straw man like being said that it's like, oh, we'll just put the wall up and that's it. And then we won't be worried about illegal immigration or things of points of entry. Of course, that's not the case. So there's a couple other things. I want to talk about the fact checking that went on. But before I do that, I want to talk about the idea of, is there a crisis at the border? Now, this argument's being made, I think that it's irrelevant, first off. And let me tell you why. It's irrelevant because the Democratic leadership is saying the wall is immoral. So it's not even, to them, that statement goes, it's not contingent on if there's a crisis or not. Because if that was the case, they would be making the effectual argument. The wall isn't effectual, or the wall costs too much. And the reason is we don't think there's a crisis at the border. But when you say it's immoral, what you're really saying is Trump pushing border security is immoral. And clearly we need border security regardless if you term it a crisis or not. So the morality, when you look at the actual government shutdown, the number one point to remember is this. The Democrats are unwilling to negotiate or even give $1 because they think that border security is immoral. That's what they're saying until they articulate their position in a better manner. And we know that that is a lie because they voted for the exact same border security in the past, the exact same barriers and fencing that Trump's proposing. So we know that they're lying when they say it's an issue of morality. And so the conclusion to be reached, very simply, is the Democrats are more concerned with fighting with Trump and not giving him a win than they are with the people hurt by the government shutdown and border security. Period. That's it in a nutshell. So when you hear all these celebrities talking about the morality of this and that and the other, remember, you should be directing a lot of that rage at the Democrats because they're the ones that said, we don't care about people that get food stamps. We don't care about government employees. What we care about most is fighting with Trump, period. That's what they said. Yeah, he should have ran clips of all of the Democrats talking about the need to control illegal immigration and barriers before. Remember, Bernie, did you list Bernie on that list? Yeah, I mean, Bernie used to run on 2017. This used to be a progressive, right, a left-wing talking point. Because left-wing used to be the party of unions and labor. And so you had all sorts of left-wing leaders that didn't like illegal immigration. They actually fought them at the border. They were scabs in a sense. You brought in these illegal immigrants to drive down the labor costs. They hated that. That was a left-wing talking point. There was also left-wing talking points that illegal immigrations increased the population of the United States, which strained our environmental resources. It was bad for the environment. But that's all gone because it's been sacrificed at the altar of, cheap labor, more votes for us. That they care more about that than their constituents, the legal residents of the United States. Period. Now, anyways, on to the question of if there's a crisis. Now, the reason this question is being debated is Trump is threatening to use emergency powers to build the wall using defense money. And there's all kinds. So, it's complicated, and I don't understand the exact laws very well. I'll be the first to admit that. So please don't just take my word on this. Look into it yourself before you just believe me. But the general idea is this. We got all these different pools of money, and some of those pools of money, under certain conditions, the president's allowed to unilaterally spend, but then other, like, just general budgetary constraints or budgetary money, the Congress has to vote on. And so if Trump declares this a national emergency, then he could pull money from some of these pools he's allowed to, like defense, I've heard it said, maybe aid for Puerto Rico, things like that, other areas that have been spent for emergencies, and spend it on the wall. It makes a lot of Trump supporters upset when I say this, but I am against Trump doing that very strongly. And I'll tell you why. The first thing that a Democratic president will do when they get in is just say, climate change is a national emergency. Now we're going to take all this money we are going to use elsewhere and spend it on climate change. That's exactly the first thing that will happen. And I don't see how Trump supporters can't see this. It's exactly what will happen. Every president from here on out will just be like, oh, my pet issue is an emergency. I'm going to call it a national emergency, say it's a crisis, and then use these powers. Trump did it. No one had a problem when Trump did it. And that'll set the precedent, and it'll be done over and over again. One of the big issues I have in general with our political system is we have started to see the legislative branch mean less and less. The courts and the president mean more and more. That's why you see such big fights over the courts. That's why you see such big fights over the presidency. And that's not the way it was supposed to be. If there was one branch that should have, they were supposed to be co-equal, obviously. But I would argue if there's one branch that should have a little more power than the others, it would be the legislative branch. Because those are the people that are closest to the people that we're voting for. Now, yes, I know Congress sucks. But that's why you should vote for me when I run. District 5, Pennsylvania, if you're in this district, vote for me. I'll be getting more information out about me running. You should vote for people that you should run yourself. You should find people to run that actually care about constituents, even if there's, people that totally disagree with you. Let's get people in there that actually care about constituents, even if the specifics are different. And I know I'm going on a little soapbox rant here, but that's why I don't understand why the third parties don't all run together. Just draw straws. Gary Johnson for vice president, Jill Stein for president. We're combining the Green Party, the Libertarian, the Constitutionalist, whatever. Because the issue is we at least all care about the constituents. And we think there's a lot of people in Washington at this point that are bought and paid for. Bam. I think that we'd have a far better system, even if it was people pushing policies I don't like. Because that initial policy of let's get people that care in there, and then we could have real debates, like to help the people. That's at least my articulation of it. But regardless, that's just a little aside. Congress their power has been waning more and more and more. For example, they gave basically war power. It's supposed to be Congress is supposed to declare wars before we go around bombing people. But, after 9/11, it's just president's just like, yeah, we're going here. Bam, bomb them. The president could bail out banks. The president has near total control over trade policy. All sorts of things like that. It's too much power in the hands of the president. The courts have way too much power. They're interpreting things. They're supposed to just interpret the law. Executive's supposed to enforce, but the people writing the law are supposed to be Congress. That's one of the reasons, even though I don't take a heavy stance on abortion, I'm against Roe v. Wade. Because I don't think that the Constitution said anything about abortion. I think applying the right to privacy to it is asinine. It should be a law. It should be state law. It should be rejected by the Supreme Court, and they should have said, yeah, this Roe v. Wade, we shouldn't have ruled the way we did. It should be up to the states. And if people don't like that, well, then you could pass an amendment or pass a national law that says abortion, pass an amendment that says this is now abortion law. But the Constitution's pretty clear that it's just Congress that has the right to write legislation. It's just supposed to be the Supreme Court enforcing it. And any power is not granted specifically to the federal government or down to the state. And so there's nothing specifically about abortion in the Constitution. It should be a state issue. That's not saying whether or not I'm for or against abortion. That's just the legality of it. That's the way it should be. So I think that that's just examples of the executive branch and the judicial branch being too powerful. And so if we give Trump, just because we agree with the wall, if you're a Trump supporter, doesn't mean you should cheer for an expansive executive power. Because when you do that, those same expanses of power will be used by the next person that gets in that you don't like. So I am against him doing that. Period. However, having said that, clearly I'm still for the wall. But having said that, the idea then that's being argued is the Dems see this coming. Schumer and Pelosi see this coming. So they have to start making the argument along with all of their mouthpieces, which it's funny. You can find clips on YouTube, which is how everyone repeats the same thing. Manufactured crisis, a manufactured crisis, a manufactured crisis, a manufactured crisis. All news outlets, all these Democratic politicians, they're all repeating the exact same talking point, right? Yeah, thanks, drumming farmer. Take it easy. But they're all repeating the same talking points over and over and over. And it's because they know, oh, Trump's going to try to declare, say it's a crisis and declare national emergency. I don't think that he should do that, because, like I said, but there is a crisis. My interpretation is for Trump to declare it an emergency and use other funds. That type of crisis is a different type of crisis. To me, that is a crisis of like a natural disaster, like there was a hurricane or a terrorist attack or, illness, disease starts wiping something out. Those are the type of emergency, like fast acting impact crisis that we're talking about. The crisis on the border is more of a slow rolling crisis. For those that say it's not a crisis, it's like, let's look at some numbers. How many illegal immigrants are in the United States? We have studies that say between 11 million and upwards of 20 million. And the ones that say upwards of 20 million, this isn't right-wing source. This is actually a recent study by Yale, which said that they criticize all the other numbers because they say they only rely on census data. And there's all kinds of problems like that. Like, who that's relying on people to honestly fill out data saying, yes, I'm an illegal, which a lot of them don't. And so they use all sorts of other metrics to come up with their low estimate is something like 20 million. Higher estimates are above 25 million. So we don't know by 10 million people how many illegals are in the country. That is insane. I put a video up, which I recommend everyone check. One of the things that I find hilarious is how if you leave people, it's particularly people that are talking about the expansion of government programs and increased government power, if you leave them talk enough, they'll contradict themselves. They'll make a series of arguments that end up arguing against themselves. So in this video, it's an interview Tucker Carlson's having with this guy, and he's from New York City, and they're talking about de Blasio's plan to have universal health care in New York City. The plan is asinine for various reasons. Basically, they're saying illegal immigrants would be allowed to use this plan. They're going to put aside, they think it'll cost $100 million. Tucker correctly shows them, like, that's basically $166 for every person that lives in New York. Do you really think $166 is going to cover everyone's medical expense for a year? Of course not. So the plan's ludicrous. It's clearly just virtue signaling. However, in his attempt to defend this plan, this is what this gentleman says, who's a Democratic strategist. I think he works for de Blasio. He says, Tucker's like, so wait a minute, you're going to allow any illegal, illegal, it doesn't matter. Anyone hops off a plane in New York City, they're entitled to these healthcare measures, including illegals. And the guy says, yes. And he says, but hear me. And Tucker's like, how are you going to afford this? And the guy says, well, hear me out. Actually, it will save us money because the way it works right now is illegals get free health care in emergency rooms. And that's where they go, instead of preventative care that's cheaper and things like that, anytime they have any problem, they go to the emergency room, which, he doesn't say this, but the implication is that it's crowding emergency rooms. And it's costing everyone a ton of money because emergency room visits actually cost way more money and they use way more hospital resources than just things like preventive care. And so they're using the emergency rooms in lieu of preventive care. And because they're not paying, that means the cost of everyone else's insurance is driven through the roof. And so if we just gave all of them free universal health care, like free Medicare, free Medicaid, it would actually be cheaper. Now, do you see what he just said? He literally made the argument against illegal immigration. He said, the argument you always hear is, they're not getting welfare. They're not getting free services. No, they're a net benefit to the economy. Of course, they're great. It's just a myth that, Republicans and Trump-type people push that illegals are actually using these services. No, it's not, and this guy knows it. He knows that you could go into the emergency room and get this care. And it is driving costs up. It's driving costs up so much that he claims it would be cheaper to have universal health care than allow illegals to go to the emergency room. This is exactly the strategy that's used for all those that want increased government intervention over and over again. They get something, they'll say, oh, we think that we should allow illegals in and it'll be great and it won't harm anything. And then when the harms start coming, their answer is, well, you know what the problem is? We need more government control. So now let's just give them all free healthcare. And then when that backfires and ends up costing us a bunch of money, they'll go, see, the problem is we need more government intervention. It's a never-ending cycle. And it's the same with safety, by the way, right? This is kind of an argument against the neocons / neo-libs, because they're the same party at the top level. When they said, like, oh, you know, the Patriot Act, we need the Patriot Act. It's to keep you safe. Trust us, it's to keep you safe. So let's say you have the Patriot Act for 5 years and it's like, yeah, no major terrorist attacks. See, that proves the Patriot Act worked. But let's say there is a terrorist attack. Do they say, oh, that proves the Patriot Act didn't work? There was an attack anyways. They say, oh, geez, the Patriot Act's not enough. We need more infringement, more government control, more invasion of your privacy. They'll never argue for less government. It's always more, 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 more. That's how you know what the end result is? The socialist paradise of the Soviet Union and Mao's China, where hundreds of millions were killed in the name of doing the right thing. That's exactly how it happens. And so we could see just from that argument alone, yes, illegals it is a crisis. Do we agree healthcare is a crisis? Yes, we do. Now, is illegal immigration the only factor creating the crisis? No, not at all. But that's one portion of why illegal immigration is a crisis there. The burden on the healthcare system, the expense that it costs. Crime is another one. Now, I'll get to the fact-checking business here later, but needless to say, it was a joke. Trump didn't say anything about illegals commit more crime than native citizens. Now, you could argue he implied that by talking how much crime they had, but that's still not, the fact check would be erroneous to say that was a lie then. He just said, here are crimes that illegals have committed. The numbers were all real. So that's not a proper use of fact check to say that that was erroneous. Anyways, illegals do commit a lot of crime. And actually, the numbers, the people that make these arguments, I was talking about this on my friend Drone Tech's video yesterday. There's two things to say about this. The first is, it's funny that we can now use demographic statistics on crime. Because, again, I have to preface this because we live in such a crappy PC world. I'm not a racist at all. You can check out videos. I've all sorts of videos that are explaining, like, my admiration for immigrants, my admiration for legal immigrants, my admiration for people of all sorts of colors. Like I've said over and over again, that if I was born in the inner city, I know I'm weak-willed. I would not have been able to be a success. I would have probably fallen in with, you know, shady characters and would have just contributed to the mess. And the, you know, inner city blacks that have actually worked their way out of those communities, to me, are some of the greatest Americans we've ever had. When, like, every year that Martin Luther King Day comes around, I think about that. I think about the unbelievably, like, some of the best Americans that we've ever had. Imagine being a slave, and when you end, when they end slavery, all you want is to prove that you're able to work just as hard as the people that had you as slaves. You're just like, I'm not looking for vengeance. I'm not saying go kill these people. Just let me have the exact same opportunities that these other people have. You know, let me go settle my own land and be a farmer and do things myself. That is such a strength of morality and convictions that it's unbelievable to me. I'm so focused, like, you know, my favorite fiction's like revenge stories. Like, I love Moby Dick or The Count of Monte Cristo. That's the type of person I would have been. So, I'm not racist, but let's look at this. Like, if I start, like, if we're talking about cop shootings and stuff, and I'll make what I think is the very reasonable argument, just screaming racism is not solving anything. Let's take a nuanced look at the data. And so when we look at it, you could take skin color out of it. You just see in these neighborhoods that have increased violent crime, there tends to be more of a chance of police to have a violent interaction, whether it be legitimate or illegitimate on the police's part. In other words, you're more likely to pull your gun and actually fire it if you're in, you know, inner city Chicago where there's all kinds of gang violence going on than you are if you're in rural Pennsylvania where there's basically nothing going on. And it turns out, I'm not saying like genetically or anything like that, but the people that live in those communities turned out to be predominantly African American. So that, to me, is a better explanation of why you see disproportional more police shootings, because when you look at the crimes, you see those communities commit disproportionately more violent crime, which seems to make sense. Those stats are real. And I'm not saying, oh, we should use those stats to vilify black people or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have to have an honest conversation about the statistics. But you can't make those claims. People will just be like, racist, racist, racist. No, I'm not a racist. I actually care about inner city black people. I want to see the problem of the poor relationship with the police and police shootings and inner city violence amongst each other in the black community and interracial violence. I would like to see that all ended, right? I really would. But just screaming racism's not solving the problem. It just drives an antagonistic relationship between the police and the black community even further. So we should actually look at the data and, use it as best we can to come up with a reasonable conclusion and solutions. But that's yelled racist. The same people that will call you a racist for that are now, with a smile on their face, saying, actually, illegals commit crime less than native-born U.S. citizens. First off, those numbers aren't necessarily true. People say that, like you saw all these fact checkers saying that. Let's see the study. Okay, what study are you citing? They don't really cite the study, do they? And then the couple people I've had arguments with that cite studies are citing like the Cato Institute. And not to get into it, but a lot of those numbers are smaller scale and they're referencing just individual states, the same states that don't have a good idea of how many illegals are there or the status of everyone they arrest if they're legal or not, etc. But they're smaller studies. The federal studies show that when it comes to federal crime, 44% of federal crimes, this isn't including homicide, but other federal crimes are actually committed by illegals, which are only about 5% of the population. It says non-citizen, by the way, if I'm going to be totally honest. So that includes illegals and people that are here legally but aren't citizen. But as they explain in their data set, it's hard to differentiate them statistically, but there's probably an even better chance that the illegals skew higher than just the legal non-citizens that are here. Nonetheless, they're committing much more crime disproportionately. My stance is the illegals probably are the same caliber of person as the native-born people. I don't really take a stance, but I hate this idea that it's like we're looking like, oh, they're more noble. They'll work jobs Americans aren't willing. They commit less crime. They're such great people. Cortez says they're more American than the Americans that want border security. Like, I'm tired of this narrative. It's like, to me, it's coded for like, we don't like flyover country. We don't like Trump supporters. We think that people, these other people that are coming in are better than them. They're victims. They're the oppressed. The Trump supported people, they check all the buttons. Oh, most of them are white. A lot of males in that group, So they're privileged, and these other people are oppressed and underprivileged. And so we'll cheer for the underprivileged. Never mind that, a lot of Trump supporters aren't privileged, So that's one of the things I'll say. It's like, isn't it interesting then that now we could use demographic arguments, I guess, when discussing crime. It's another just little double standard that you'll notice. But again, like I said, the numbers aren't even in their favor. And they always conveniently leave out like identity theft, right? Which we know that a huge amount of illegals are committing identity theft. Doesn't that matter? That's not a serious crime. It's a felony. If me or you do it, it's a felony. So clearly our system thinks it's important. Are we going to have a mass move to identity theft, misdemeanor, $100? Yeah, it's like having a little weed in your car. No big deal. $100. Yeah, it's easy to poo-poo it and act like it's not a big deal unless you know someone that's been the victim of it. They'll tell you the horrors of it. How it could destroy your credit, destroy your life. But who cares? We can't focus on that. It's a serious issue. So, like, you have, the healthcare costs, the crime costs, just the strain on resources in general, the strain on economics, the labor competition. Again, I don't, it's easy to look, you have to one of the things I think Trump could do better is, Trump has to understand his base is with him, but you have to be getting people in the middle and on the left to agree with you on this issue to make any headway. And a lot of those people, they're just not persuaded by being like, if you just say, well, it affects, it lowers labor costs for unskilled labor. They're just like, whatever, we don't care. So you have to put it in, couch it in words that they like. And Trump did do an okay job on this particular point, where it is, who do illegal immigrants compete with most laborly? It happens to be the African-American community, particularly low-skilled labor that occurs in the African-American community, inner city, because that's where a lot of these illegals end up going, like inner city. They end up competing for these jobs. So you have to couch it in, we know you only care, a lot of you, I won't say only, but care more about certain groups based on demographics, which I think is absurd. And so we have to now couch it in terms of that. So it's a crisis in that sense. But even that, a lot of people will say, whatever. So one of the things I learned is you have to, like, again, because there's all these appeals to emotion and appeals to specific groups, you have to learn to be able to articulate those appeals when you're persuading against, or trying to persuade people in that sense. So one of the things that I think Trump should be making, and I did a video of this, one of the arguments is Amnesty International, who's a certainly left-leaning, they would be for basically pretty much asylum for anyone that came from a poor country, I think. But we're only focusing on the issue at this point. Is it a crisis or not? Because the Dems are saying, nope, it's not a crisis. It's not a crisis. So all the things I just told you above, not a crisis to them. Okay. So Amnesty International says 60 to 80% of the women trying to cross the border into the United States that are traveling through Mexico are raped or are victims of sexual assault. The numbers show, and I did a video on this you could check out, the numbers show that since 2014 was the numbers I found, between 40 and 60,000 generally people are apprehended a month at the border. Lately it's been closer to the 60,000 number because the last 2 months that we've had, it's kind of gone like this. It was over 10 years it's been going down, 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 but there's spikes and valleys, and it like went down, and now it's reaching the highest point it's been since like 2014. It's starting to reach that number. So, but let's, like, even if you just take, like, even though we're up to over 62,000, let's just take like 45,000 people apprehended at the border a month. That's a ton of people. You know, you're basically looking at close to 500,000 people a year apprehended at the border. So if we didn't have any border security, that's 500,000 people, boom, like that. That's in a year. If we just had open borders, right? So now keep in mind, this number is just the people apprehended. We know for a fact that not everyone's apprehended. There are people, substantial amount of people getting through. That's why we have anywhere from 11 to 20 million illegals in the country. So 68% of the women victims of sexual assault, 45,000, we'll just take that number. We'll leave out the ones that we don't know about that maybe went through. 45,000 people a month getting apprehended at the border. Now, all these articles that are making the pro-asylum case, like basically the anti-Trump case, will say, I'll get to that in a minute there, Tom. All these articles, like the New Yorker put out an article, it's like, actually illegal immigration is changing. It used to be working age men that were coming, but now it's more families. And so you're seeing a lot more women and children. So let's just say a third are women. I can't find the statistics on this. The number could be higher or lower than that, but it'll give us at least a ballpark idea. So a third of 45,000 is 15,000, 60 to 80% of them victims of sexual assault. That's 9,000 to 12,000 people a month victims of sexual assault trying to get into our country because of our border policies occurring at our southern border. That's not a crisis? Take the low estimate of that. 9,000 women a month victims of sexual assault, and that's not a crisis. I find that hard to believe. I find it ridiculous that people would say that. Now, there's a question of what better way to solve this. So like my friend Tom here correctly points out, like, would he declare a national emergency? Would it help that statistic? Would a wall help that statistic? That's a reasonable debate to have. But the question is, to begin with, is it a crisis? The Democrats are saying no. So let's look at that from that issue first. They're saying it's not a crisis. Don't need to look at it. They're clearly only saying that because they hate Trump. So again, they're willing to overlook something that by any objectionable standard is a crisis. I don't think it's a crisis worth declaring the national emergency. I don't. I've already said that. But it's certainly a big deal. They don't think it is. They don't think it's a crisis. And you know they're liars. You just know it. You know that they do think that's a big deal. But they're willing to lie about it because they think that their lie is hurting Trump in some way. That's what I find ridiculous. Now, the question of would the wall solve that? I think that the issue is that we need to make it so the people don't try to make the trip in the first place. We're not going to be able to, because of the illegal nature of what's going on in the first place. Most of this abuse is coming for either fellow people that are trying to migrate with them that happen to be men, or I presume other women, that are the perpetrators of these sexual assaults, though let's be honest, predominantly men, or the coyotes that they're paying that are actually engaged in things like human trafficking, and they're basically scummy people that don't care about these people that are exploiting them for financial gain or sexual gain, things like that. That it's going to be hard for like short of like sending in the U.S. military, which I don't think anyone would suggest. How do you really decrease those numbers? So the only way we could really decrease those numbers is to have policies that discourage people from making the trip in the first place. If you go the other way with it and you say, oh, well, this is reason to provide asylum for everyone, then that's just going to massively increase the amount of people that make the trip in the first place. So it won't solve those numbers. And then it leads to a ridiculous situation where we basically then end up providing asylum to anyone who tries to get here because we say, oh, you were victimized on your way here. That means you're justified for asylum, which means there's now basically no border because everyone will just claim I was a victim on the way and there'll be unlimited immigration to the country at that point, which clearly pragmatically is not the way to go. Emotionally, people will make that argument. They'll say, well, if they're victims of sexual assault, they should be left in. And there's a question of, are these Amnesty International numbers accurate or not? But the problem is the left can't really say no, not just because it's a left-wing group, but because they push numbers like this all the time, even in the United States, where they say, you know, the numbers have been debunked, but they're like 1 in 4 women will be raped over their lifetime and things like that. So that's exactly what the problem is. So I think that the wall won't be enough to solve that, but I think it'll put a dent in it because the wall would at least be symbolic of we need to be serious about border security, and we aren't. If you're an illegal and you're watching what's going on since the time of Reagan granted amnesty to a bunch of people based on the condition that we would finally secure the border. Here we are nearly 30 years later, still nothing. Now, people will say, well, the numbers have gone down. The numbers have gone down. Yes, but we're still seeing at the low level 40,000 people a month. And actually, those numbers have gone up here recently. And we hear about more caravans that are coming. And even bigger ones supposedly coming from Honduras. So, just because the numbers have gone down, and I love this argument. If the numbers have gone down, then that proves that there's not a crisis, right? Things are getting better, so it's not a crisis. Well, greenhouse gas emissions have gone down, so does that prove climate change is no longer a problem? Of course not. They want more government regulation. So the idea, just because the numbers have gone down, we have to look and say, is 40,000 a month being apprehended a problem? Yes, it's a problem. What do the border agents say? They say, we're stretched thin. We can't do it. We need more resources. A wall would help. So I think it would. And I think right now, correctly, as Jay's saying, I don't know. Look, I won't say that about every Democrat, but there is a signal being sent by a lot of people that, yes, if you're an illegal and you somehow make it here, there's a chance that you'll have politicians advocating for you to get in and advocating for amnesty for you or some kind of legal status to be allowed to stay if you just get across the border. If we would start getting serious with things like a wall and other things like that. For God's sakes, Pelosi and Schumer just went on national TV, said the wall's immoral, said that we're all about the Statue of Liberty and not the wall. So if you're an illegal and you hear this message gets to you, you're like, oh yeah, the Statue of Liberty, like they'll take all the poor people of the world. Yep. So we need to be serious about border security. Once enough people realize, and if you look at, for example, the southern wall on Israel, and you've probably heard this stat that's been said that's like, look, it would be the is it the western or the eastern? I'm terrible. I think it would be the eastern wall is basically because there's attacks coming from Palestine. We're not talking about that wall. We're talking about the southern wall. That was all about stopping illegal immigration coming from Africa. And the numbers went from something like 17,000 a year or something like that, dropped down to like 12 a year that have made it. And I don't just think it's because like, wow, the wall's super, it's that effective. It's just the wall. Obviously they have guards and other things like that there. But I think that it's a compounding interest where it's not just the physical security is doing that great of a job. It's also the message has been sent. Dude, don't even bother. You're not going to get in. So less people probably even try. If less people are trying, that means less people being sexually assaulted. Now, maybe you're smart and you're on the left, which there are many people that are, and you'll say, yeah, but so what? What are the victims? If these women don't make the trip, then are they going to get sexually assaulted in their country of origin? Maybe, but I don't know if the numbers are that high, 60, 80%. And when you talk about 60 to 80%, like, you have to be really careful when you're talking about sexual assault statistics and stuff. Over what time frame are you talking? So we're talking 60 to 80% of these women being assaulted, if the numbers are correct, in a time frame of a couple months that it takes them to make the trip through Mexico. Are 60 to 80% of all women in Honduras being molested every 2 months? I mean, even though it's economically not a good place, I would be shocked if those are the numbers. Nonetheless, then, if that's the case, then you declare we have legal ways to look and say, okay, that country's then such a terrible country, it's basically a domestic war occurring, and so that's a reason to apply for asylum. And so we have the international community designate that. But that's not what's happened right now. In addition, asylum seekers don't go through safe areas. Like, this is one of the arguments you have in Europe, right? Where it's like, oh, these people are seeking asylum and things like that. You're not going to travel through a safe country. Like, you're not going to leave Syria or some country and go through Turkey and then go through, France, Germany, and all the way to the UK because, the UK have the best, they have the exact benefits that you were looking for. Well, that's not asylum. As soon as you've neglected to stay into a country, the first country that you were safe in, now you're an economic migrant. And let me make it really clear, I don't blame these economic migrants. If I was in Honduras and I had a family, I'd probably try to get to the United States too. But it's not the role of our government to be providing for those people. The role of our government is to be providing for the citizens of the United States. We certainly have many poor people here. And pragmatically, if we just open up our borders to every poor person in the world, the United States would be inundated with just everyone, the billions of people. The infrastructure wouldn't be able to handle it. And the end result is then it's a worse situation for everyone. It just can't work. And then there's other problems. Like if we have those types of policies, then anyone who wants to be a hard worker or something ends up fleeing, and you have sort of a brain drain that occurs in the countries of origin. So all their best people and most capable people and most able people are leaving the country, meaning the country's assured to continue in its constant decline. And so, because of that, I think that there is a crisis at the border. Again, I say that being someone who does not want Trump to declare the emergency power. But I still think there's a crisis and the Democrats are being disingenuous talking about it. And you could see it on a lot of them. You could see it in Anna Navarro, right, on CNN, doing her nails when they're talking about people that have died through violence of illegal immigration. They don't care. They don't care about a lot of that. So, yeah, that's my issue on that. Now, let's get to the fact-checking. So, I have a huge problem with fact-checking because, like, for example, people, if you do any sort of arguing online like me, I can't tell you how many times people will be like, Snopes! Here we go, Snopes! Yep, Snopes said it, so it must be true. And then they don't really look into the situation. The problem is, the idea of fact-checking to me isn't inserting opinions. It's not saying making assumptions about what someone was trying to say and then saying that your opinion is that's wrong. It's not saying, well, technically that's right, but we feel the way it's being used is wrong. That's not fact-checking. Fact-checking is Trump says, here was a good fact-check. When they said something, like 4,000 terrorists apprehended at the southern border? That was a lie. That was good fact-checking. So here's my problem with fact-checking. Number one, it's often people just rely on it without fact-checking the fact-checkers. Number two, they end up inserting a lot of opinion and innuendo that's not actual fact-checking, right? Which is also a bad thing. And then thirdly, one of the things we see with fact-checkers is that oftentimes they're wrong and no one holds them accountable. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say about them, and this is important to say, is much like it seems to be becoming a theme both in my life and all my videos here, is I find myself talking about my absolute hatred for double standards and hypocrisy over and over again. And it's the same with fact checkers. I have no like when you hear that, you'll hear me say things like, well, 90 studies show that 92% of the coverage against Trump is negative, and they're constantly grilling him and blah 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 blah. I actually don't have a problem with that, really. I do on some of the things, like if there's stories or Trump had 2 scoops of ice cream and they're just making crap up. That's one thing. But I think we should have a press that should be tough on the president. The problem is, just like these fact checkers, they didn't seem to be very tough on the last one, did they? Oh no. He didn't have any scandals. It's absolute ridiculous, and everyone knows it. We all do. And so you see people relying on these fact checkers. Just check your Facebook wall, right? Oh, man, Trump lied so much. Did you see how much he lied in his speech? 8 minutes of just total lies. Okay, like name one. So I did a whole video on CNN's lies on, or fact checking and why it was wrong. But then I was I was pointed to this on Above Top Secret where I'm at. Fox News savagely fact-checked Trump. Savage. Woo! Yeah, good choice of word. And it was Shep Smith, who's this rabid anti-Trumper, which I don't like Fox. I like Tucker Carlson on Fox. Real quick, just my spiel on mainstream media. I'm really disgusted by 95% of it. However, having said that, I'm not going to reject any, like if someone's like, well, here's something that CNN said. I'm not going to reject it just because it's CNN, because they do tell the truth on a lot of things. It's more of their opinion on how they take those facts. So I'm not one of those people that's going to be like, oh, you cited CNN, so I'm not listening to you. I'm not saying that. And I also don't think that everyone that works at these networks can be totally lumped in as being worthless. There are people at all the networks that I think are better than others. But all of them have problems. I have problems in the way I present stuff too, though, if I'm honest. So, you know. So I like Tucker. There's a couple other people in the mainstream media I like, but that's about it. You can criticize Tucker. That's fine. I don't care. But, you know, Shep Smith from Fox, he's a rabid anti-Trumper. At least Fox, which I don't like Fox, at least they bother to have rabid anti-Trumpers on. You know, the other networks, you have a panel of 7 people that just all agree, like, yeah, Trump's the devil. You know, so here's Shep Smith debunking, and his debunking was very similar to the video I did on fact-checking CNN's fact-checkers. So here's the first statement. The government statistics show that there is less violent crime committed by the undocumented immigrant population than by the general population. All right, I already kind of talked about this, but 2 things. One, it depends on what studies you're looking at. I haven't seen I have no idea, because one of the things you would expect fact checkers to do is when they cite statistics to actually back it up. Now, it's one thing if you're giving a speech, you don't have time to be like, you know, according to the Cato Institute poll done, blah, 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 blah. I get that. Trump's doing an Oval Office speech. But the fact checkers have those times to say, well, this study, here's the government numbers. Here's where you could personally at home see them. And here's what they say. That's what this proves that he was lying. But they don't do that. And like I showed you earlier, there's at least competent studies using government numbers with federal crimes that 44% of a lot of different definitions of federal crimes are actually committed by illegals. Also, notice that he uses the word violent crime, which means they're overshadowing things like identity theft, as I said earlier. So that's the number one thing. It's not necessarily true. A lot of the government numbers go the other way, and it's how you interpret them. And he doesn't say that. So that's basically a lie by omission on his point. All of these fact checkers just make it seem like, oh, the numbers all say one thing. That's it. That's not the case. And I feel the other numbers going the other way are actually better. But, you know, it's not to get into. And the second thing is, so what? Even if what Shep's saying here is true, that doesn't mean Trump lied. Trump didn't say illegal immigrants commit more crime. His point is, these are crimes that could have been avoided because these people shouldn't be here. Not they're worse than Americans. But they make it seem like that was a lie. And again, the numbers I was citing come from, I'll read you. It says, a new report in federal convictions reveals that nearly half of crimes were committed by non-citizens, which is most likely to be illegal immigrants. The U.S. Sentencing Commission, reviewing data from 2011 to 2016, said that 44.2% of those convicted of violating a federal law were non-citizen. For perspective, CIS Research Director Stephen Camarotto said that non-citizens make up about 8.4% of the U.S., so their criminal impact is 2.5 times their percentage of the population. That's the U.S. Sentencing Commission. That's government numbers. So that's where I was getting that. So next, let's go into the next fact-checking claim. Fox News savagely fact-checking Trump. And it was just, you know, turn on Facebook, they'll tell you. Next argument. Trump also argued for his wall by saying that immigrants carry illegal drugs across the border. But Smith pointed out that the wall wouldn't make much of a difference there. Government statistics show much of the heroin actually comes not over the unguarded border, but through ports of call. Number one, same problem as before. Okay, there's still a lot of drugs that are coming through. Trump didn't say more come through the southern border. He said drugs are a huge problem. Wall would help solve that. No one's saying it would solve all of it. So as Shep's so one, it's just not true that Trump lied on this. But people still push forth like, oh, yeah, fact check, that was a lie. That would be like saying, you know, for example, with Obamacare, they said, oh, you know, all these people without health care and blah, 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 and our plan would be able to solve them. Well, a large proportion of the people without health care were the homeless. Did Obamacare help them? No, of course not. Therefore, no need for Obamacare. Obama lied. No, of course not. Of course, Obamacare and Obama, although you want to be able to solve everything, you know, because I think Obama was coming from, you know, a benevolent place. He wanted to help people, I think, with his healthcare policy. We wouldn't say he lied because there's a lot of people that wouldn't be solved. If he said 100% of the people will be covered, and that's a lie. But if he just said there's a problem and this could help it, that's not a lie. Neither is Trump lying here. Second, of course, no one's claiming that this will be able to solve all drugs, but there still are, numbers show that although a lot of them do come from ports of call, there still are a lot that are occurring from the southern border, and that would be able to solve them. Additionally, we don't know exactly how many are getting through the southern border. We just know how many are caught at ports of call, how many drugs are found at ports of call that came through illegally versus how many drugs are found from people trying to get through on non-ports of call. By the very nature of things, officers are more likely to find drugs where they're stationed than where they're not. So people illegally getting through non-ports of call probably a less chance of getting caught than the people coming through ports of call. Or if that's not the correct way to put it. There's more likelihood that more drugs will be found at the ports of call because there's more officers there looking for drugs. Do you see what I'm saying? The third thing is but I still would say there's probably still more coming through these ports. The third thing I would say is you have to understand that there's these drugs come through, like China's responsible for a lot of fentanyl, but when you're talking about a lot of opium products, a lot of that's like cartels and drug gangs and things like that. They also make their bones with things like human trafficking and other things like that, that the wall would actually be able to solve more. And so it would still be a financial hit to these groups, which would hurt the overall drug trade. Now, is this the end-all be-all? Of course not. I think there's all sorts of things we could do to stop the drug problem, such as go after pharmaceutical industries and doctors that pushed opioid painkillers on everyone, such as legalizing a lot of drugs instead of providing incentives for criminality over them. So I think there's definitely other answers, but Trump's saying, right, illegal immigration has its tentacles in a lot of things that it exacerbates problems that already exist. Even if we totally eliminated illegal immigration, would crime be solved? Would drugs be solved? Would healthcare costs be solved? Would poverty be solved? Absolutely not. But illegal immigration exacerbates to a small extent all of that type of things. This argument seems to be an argument, if you can't solve all drugs coming in, then why even try? Why even have a border? Which is just ridiculous. Next argument. And he basically only makes three, so this is the final one. Shep says, he talks about undocumented crossings over the past months. In fact, the number of undocumented crossings over the southern border has been steadily down over the last 10 years, and government reports that there is more outward traffic than inward traffic. Now notice how he says he talked about crossings over the past months. Does he then say, in fact, numbers show crossings over the past months have been down? No, he then changes it to the past 10 years. Why? Because he's lying. Because numbers do show over the past months that the numbers have in fact been up. Therefore, what Trump said was actually a fact. So if we go to the numbers, and this is from the official government numbers on the Center for Border Patrol, Southwest Border, total applications and inadmissibles, we see the last months they have records for that I was able to find, and I'm pretty sure that they have, is it counts this as the fiscal year of 2019, so it would be November. 62,000 crossing. October, 60,000. September before that, 50,000. August before that, 46,000. July before that, 40,000. So we've gone from 40 in July, 46 in August, 50 in September, 60 in October, 62 in November. That's what? 5 months that it's been increasing? Now, let's go back to what Shep said here, Mr. Fact Checker. He talks about undocumented crossings over the past months. Well, the past 5 months it's been increasing. So Shep is lying to you. And he's doing that by changing the question. Now he goes back to 10 years. Yes, the number is down over 10 years. But it's starting to go up again. It's still not near the numbers that it was 10 years ago, but it's still a problem. And second, so he's just flat out lying here, the fact checker. And the second argument is that, again, just because that's true doesn't mean that it's not a problem. Is Shep Smith also going to argue that climate change isn't a problem because the amount of greenhouse gas emissions have been steadily declining? Or violence against women's not a problem because those numbers have been declining? Gun crime's not a problem because they've been declining? Of course not. He would say, yes, those are still major problems. So this idea of the fact check, and it was like this, I did a video on the CNN fact check. It was more the same. You check it out. The only thing on the CNN video that I found that technically I think they were right about Trump lying, and it's real nitpicky, but when Trump said that the new steel slat, they wanted a concrete wall, but the Democrats requested a steel steel slits or slats or whatever. Yeah. that technically the Democrats never requested that. What actually happened was Trump was like, concrete wall, and the Democrats came out and were like, actually that would be bad because Border Patrol agents wouldn't be able to see through it. They prefer more of the steel slats. And so Trump, they still weren't requesting the steel slats. They just said if you had to choose between concrete or steel, they would choose the steel. But that still wasn't a request. That's it. That's the lie that I saw. Now you could say, okay, but yes, he told the truth, but his conclusions based on those truths, what he's suggesting is wrong. It wouldn't be good. That's fine. But that's not what fact-checking's meant to do. Now you're talking about opinions. Your opinion is. So I just find this argument, and like I said, when I was talking about the problems of them, the problem is people just say, oh, fact check, that's it. I can't tell you how many times I saw this on Facebook by people that I know are intelligent that are like, check this out. Do you see how many times a fact checker said Trump lied? Trump just constantly lied. Where? Give me the actual stats. Where did he lie? You know? So, again, and this coming from, where's the fact checking of Pelosi and Schumer on a wall being immoral? Where are the fact checkers being like, well, actually, they didn't say a wall was immoral in these 10 situations. Here's my favorite from CNN, though, by the way, which you can check this out. This is absolutely hilarious. They said that when Trump said that a lot of these politicians saying walls are immoral have walls around their houses and have advocated for walls in the past. This is how CNN said that was a lie. They said, well, clearly this was a reference to the Obamas. And the Obamas have a fence around their place, but not a wall. So that's a lie. So one, the idea that they have a border, they just conflate anyways and say that it's a lie. But second, they say what they think Trump meant and then say their interpretation of that is a lie. That is ridiculous. That isn't a fact checker. A fact checker is supposed to be objective and say, here are the facts, here or not. That is not what a fact checker does. That's just being a pundit or a propaganda piece for your side of the argument. So I'm sick and tired of people like it's some authority. And I know that at least Tom's on here and some other people, if you're watching this and you're involved in debate, or maybe even many other people, you know that this is just an appeal to authority. Oh, you put a special badge on that says fact checker, and now all of a sudden you could just spout your opinions off as fact and no one could question you. You don't have to show your data. You could just be like, yeah, sources say that's wrong. Fact checker. See, can't question that. I'm a fact checker. And we see this is used over and over again. These same fact checkers. Now that's just on the wall, right? These are the same people that say, fact checkers show that Trump lies like 7.3 times every minute. Huh, that's so ridiculous. Fact checkers show that, but Snopes said this. Snopes said this. You can go, I can't tell you how many times I've gone through a Snopes article and been like, nope, they were wrong here. Oh, this is wrong here. Now, does that mean they're wrong every time? No, absolutely not. But stop appealing to the authority like Snopes is any better than Fox News. They're not. Both of them you should look into. You shouldn't just accept their word at face value. Again, I'm not saying never look at what these fact checkers say. Oftentimes they can be right. And fact checking is something that should be important. But people just, without looking into it, just say, yeah, they're right. Like you'll see, what is it, PolitiFact, that they have a range of, it's not just true or false. It could be mostly true, mostly false, etc. And they'll say things all the time. It'll be like, oh, Democrats spent X amount of dollars on, some study that was worthless. And they'll be like, that's mostly false because, yes, they did spend that amount of money. But they were also hoping that, the outcome of that could actually lead to other things. Yeah, so then it's true is what it is, not mostly false, based on your opinion of how it was interpreted. So, yeah, I get quite fed up with these fact checkers. So, yeah, if anyone has any more on the wall, if not, I was going to get on to my other topic, an hour and a half on the wall. But keep in mind, right? So just in conclusion with everything about the wall, when you hear these moral arguments being made, that about talking about people in the shutdown, I agree, it sucks that people aren't being paid in the shutdown. That does suck. But remember, which side's refusing to negotiate? Which side's saying it's immoral? Oh, you know what? I will go through some more of the wall. My buddy Rick sent me some questions. Let me mark down the time here. The time is 1:34. I have to write that somewhere. Hopefully I'll remember it. 1:34. Let me write in the chat here so I can remember this. So I can tell him to go check this section out. He sent me a series of questions. Some of them I've already answered in a roundabout way, but I will go through them. By the way, if anyone else has questions or opinions they'd want to make for me, I think it makes it go much more smooth. So he's got 10 questions. I'll go through them fast. Says, I said that the Dems are just doing everything to stop Trump from getting a win. The question is, can you blame them? Trump says really crappy things, calls people horse faces. Why not just drop that and lead? I agree with the second portion of that. He should just drop it and lead. I think a lot of these comments are absurd. But should they purposely be shutting down the government and risking border security just to stop Trump from getting a win because they don't like his language? No. Not in any way, shape, or form. That is a terrible thing to do. Especially then when they're going to get on their moral high horse and the media is going to push it. Basically, it's like saying, it's like saying that, you volunteer helping the poor, but the guy that runs the homeless shelter that you're helping with is like a jerk. So yeah, screw the poor people. I'm not going to help them anymore. No, that's a terrible thing. That's what's happening here. They are saying that their fight, because they don't like Trump's language, I guess, it's worth keeping him from getting a win. The suffering that all the people in the shutdown and the lack of border security is worth it. I heavily disagree. Second, do I think there's a crisis at the border? I already discussed that, so I won't go into that much more. 3, how much money is worth spending at the border? Trump said a wall would cost $10 billion, but in his wisdom, he then said he could do it for 4. Then he said 8. He changed the numbers, basically. So how much should a wall be? I don't know exactly how much it should be. How much would I be willing to spend? I can't put an exact number on it, but if we're willing to spend trillions of dollars in foreign wars, I think that we should be allowed to spend billions to defend our borders. I don't think that that's a problem whatsoever. And here's another point. That reminds me of another point of something that I was addressing, and I did a video on. Pelosi tells us that this is immoral, right? And the idea, keep in mind why she's saying it's immoral. Now, I'm going to start talking about skin color here in a minute. Trust me, the skin color isn't important to me. I don't care. But it is important to the Democrats, people like Pelosi, and they make these arguments all the time. So I'm going to use their own argumentative style against them. Pelosi is basically saying the wall is immoral, the implication of being that want to keep brown people out, people that look different out, and that's immoral. At the same time, the exact same people making those arguments that the wall are immoral are flipping their lid because Trump wants to pull out of Syria and Afghanistan. So to them, protecting our country by having a wall that doesn't kill anyone or anything like that is immoral because it's to stop brown people. But bombing brown people in other countries that aren't trying to come over here and actually killing them, that is very moral. And in fact, it's bad to try to stop doing that. Do you see the insanity of this? Who in their right mind could argue that? What happened to the Democrats, the party of peace? Well, it's because they never were. The establishment Democrats are the exact same as the neocons and the neolibs. They've never seen a war they didn't like. So now we're in the awkward position of Pelosi telling us why bombing some brown person across the world is an ethical and important thing to do, but putting a border, because they might try to get us at some point, but putting a border up at our wall, which would try to solve some of those same people, that's no good. That's immoral. That's the insanity we're talking about here. So yeah, I would say that, I certainly see no problem with the $5 billion. The other problem is this. Even the Democrats admit, like Como admits on that section that I put up, that yes, they don't think you should have the wall sea to sea on the border, but there are definitely places that there isn't a wall right now that could use it. Okay, then you say, we'll give you this current $5 billion, but right into the legislation, we want input on where it's going to be put. And I'm sure Trump doesn't have a problem putting it in the most crisis areas first. And then later when Trump goes, okay, I need another $20 billion, have your fight then. Now, I might disagree with them then, but at least the government's not shut down at that point. Basically, the Democrats are admitting, yes, we know Border Patrol says we need more wall. Yeah, and I've already went through why $5 billion isn't a lot of money in contextually with the budget that we have. So they're just, again, it's more important to fight with Trump than border security or taking care of the people in the shutdown. The next question, basically it's a question about the 4,000 people that were supposedly terrorists apprehended at the southern border. But in actuality, the number was 4. Actually, I think the number was 6, but it was 6 in 6 months. So it's basically, according to the numbers, we've apprehended 6 potential terrorists in 6 months at the border. That's 1 per month, if my math's correct. Is it worth $5 billion to stop just that? I don't know. That's a difficult question, but it's not stopping just that. There's all the other problems with illegal immigration that basically my whole video at this point's been about. But, I don't know. How many terrorists would it be worth? How many terrorists, what was it, 13, 9/11? Now, granted, they didn't come through the southern border. But we had 6 potential terrorists? That seems pretty huge to me. Omar Mateen was one. He gunned down, what, 60 people in a Florida nightclub? So we have alleged terrorists or suspected terrorists. We're catching 1 per month at the border. That seems to be a pretty darn good reason to have border security. Who knows how many we didn't catch? You know? So yeah, it's not 4,000. But how many terrorists do you really know? It only takes 1 to have a huge incident. And we have $50 billion to send to other countries for aid. We don't have $5 billion to help keep us safe from things like that. So yeah, when it comes to that, I think that, yeah, that number still is big. Is it the best way to spend money on this? Well, not just on fighting terrorism, but again, it's the best way, in my opinion. Well, I don't even know the best. I think the number one thing we should do to stop illegal immigration is immediately start arresting employers that knowingly hire illegal immigrants. That would do a lot to send the signal we're not messing around and to stop providing the incentive for the illegals to come in the first place. That's just my opinion on it. Is it the best way to fight terrorism specifically? Well, no. But again, it's solving illegal immigration is doing a lot. I think the wall is a good idea, and it's worth at least the $5 billion, and I would say more than what's been requested by Trump so far. And it's definitely the $5 billion is worth stopping the shutdown because the net benefit would be good. Where am I on the scale? 1 to 100, open borders versus a wall, a 40-foot high wall. I would be like an 85. I think that we need a wall, a physical barrier. I think for all the reasons I said before. I'm not an extremist on it. There literally needs to be a wall on every single piece of land, and it needs to be a 40-foot monstrosity. I'm willing to listen to experts talk about what the best type of thing. Again, like I said earlier, this joke that, oh, they could saw through the steel. Yeah, taking hours, needing power equipment, and we'd still have border agents that would, the chances of them finding them would be far better with the wall than without the wall. The same question on how much I would spend. I already kind of went through 1 to 100 billion. I mean, I see no problem with spending. It's hard for me to put a number on it, but like $50 billion. I don't see a problem with that. If Obama declared a national emergency to do something what Trump's doing, what would the reaction be? Yeah, I agree with you there. I said as much. And it's worse than that. It's just not Obama declaring a national emergency. It'll be, what does the next person do? And that's exactly what's going to happen. And for those of you that might have just tuned in, I'm against, even though I think it is a crisis, I'm against Trump using these national emergency powers because the first thing that will happen when a Democrat is president within a month, they'll say, climate change is a national emergency. Now I'm going to take a bunch of money to do X, Y, and Z with. That is exactly what will happen, and I don't understand how Trump supporters don't see that that's literally the first thing that would happen. Or racism's a national emergency, so we're going to take this money and then give reparations or something like that. How do we not see that's exactly what this will be used for? So yeah, I'm heavily against it, and I agree a lot of the people are being hypocritical that are like, well, we think this issue is so important that Trump should do this. But had Obama did that with an issue he thought was important, which he basically did, Obama basically, like with the DACA decisions and basically choosing not to enforce a lot of the border laws and just allowing certain illegals in, the Dreamer decision, that wasn't voted on by Congress. Now, granted, it didn't have to do with spending billions of dollars, but you saw what the reaction was from Trump supporters there. They were very upset. So I'm with you 100%. I think that's hypocritical. Just a couple more questions you had. Do I believe Trump when he says that workers that aren't being paid still support him? Yes. Some, not all, obviously. But clearly there are regardless, if I was right now a government employee and I wasn't getting paid, first off, I'd be like, both of these sides need to come together and do something. But secondly, if I was someone who's believed in border security, I would say, and I do think we should have border security. But the implication of this question seems to be the shutdown's all Trump's fault, and therefore everyone's blaming Trump that's not getting paid right now. I think that I don't know. I don't know the exact numbers of Democrat versus Republican or what opinion polls or anything like that shows. But my idea is there's probably predominantly 3 groups of people that aren't getting paid right now as far as blame. There are those that are blaming the Democrats more, those blaming the Republicans more, and those that don't really care and are blaming both sides. So, yeah, I do believe Trump when he says that there would be people that say that. I don't think that there were people that were like, I'm for a wall, I'm for border security. Oh, now that I'm not getting paid, I just blame Trump. He should cave into the Democrats' demands and not give in. I don't believe that's happening. Did I believe Trump when he said Mexico would pay for it? Yeah, I guess this is worth talking about. Anyone who took him literally in that statement is, like, it's fooling themselves. It's like when Trump said, well, no, it's not like that. I won't say that. I knew from the get-go. First off, I thought it was stupid for Trump to say it, so I will give that. Because what happens is the media and the Democrats, sometimes they'll take Trump literally when the crux of what he's saying is actually true. And it was, there was a famous quote, there was a quote that I thought was really interesting that summed this up, that said, basically the difference between the people that hate Trump and the people that like Trump are this. The people that hate Trump take him literally, and dismiss the overall point he's trying to make. The people that like Trump take the overall point he's trying to make, but don't look at him literally. And that's all the difference. So the best example I can give of this is, there was a time where Trump tweeted out, and he was probably watching Fox News, because Tucker had some guy on that was talking about the increase in violent crime, things like grenade attacks happening in Sweden that are occurring in the migrant community, particularly with Islamic migrants. And so they were talking about this, and Trump tweets like later that night, he's like, oh, the terrible attack in Sweden last night. Well, there was no attack. So the media, all they had to do was not shoot themselves in the foot and come out and say, yeah, there was no attack last night in Sweden. We don't know what the president's talking about. But instead what the media did was they said, yeah, there was no attack in Sweden last night. We don't know what the president's talking about. And there are basically never attacks in Sweden, and it's the greatest place. And he's just full of it that there's Islamic terror occurring there. Because that allowed a bunch of people to be like, well, no, actually, it is getting really bad. Like, grenade attacks are up 1,000%. There are no-go zones. There's all this terrible stuff happening. And so they just shot themselves in the foot. Now, when it comes to this Mexico argument, I think that most people, I would say 95% of people, even that support Trump, knew that didn't mean Mexico was going to write a check, under the little comment section, right, for the wall. Here's $50 billion. There you go. Everybody knew that's not what Trump was saying. Trump was saying, he's making an argument when he's talking about this, that Mexico's screwing us over because they're allowing all these crappy people. They're not allowing good people through. What they're doing is allowing criminals, people like that through. That's what got him in trouble when he said most of them are rapists, and I assume some of them are good people. Like, the crux of what he's saying is, like, they're allowing crappy people through. A lot of these illegals coming through are crappy people. Now, you could argue about, his exact words. Yeah, I think that he often is grossly hyperbolic and it ends up getting him in trouble. But that was one of the appeals, because people were so tired of PC culture being applied selectively, where you have to walk on eggshells and watch your every word. So Trump was like this superhero to people that were just like, yes, he's basically saying what I think, but he's just saying it in the most like jerkish, boorish manner possible. And I love it. He's making people's heads explode. Great. That's what a lot of people thought. So I don't like the lack of finesse he has in a lot of this. But what he was saying is that because Mexico's basically screwing us over, they're going to pay for it. We're going to put this wall up, and we're going to start hurting them economically through trade policy. And eventually, we're going to have a trade deal based on this that's going to, whatever the cost of the wall, we'll end up making more money through the better trade deal. And so it will provide for the cost of the wall. That's what it was about. It's like, if I said, it'd be the equivalent of this. I'm getting a promotion at work, and I have to buy a new suit. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to buy this $1,000 suit. My wife would be like, yeah, dude, you're not getting a $1,000 suit. And I'd say, don't worry, the job will pay for it. I'm not literally saying that my job's going to write me a check for a $1,000 suit. I'm saying, this suit will help me get that job, and then once I have that job, I'll make enough money that would have paid for the cost of that suit. But is that money literally I make from the job in the future? That's the money that's literally going to the person I'm buying the suit off of? No. That's what I assume Trump was talking about when he was talking about exactly the argument that Jay's making here. You see these furniture stores say, we pay the sales tax. They're not literally paying the sales tax. They're saying, we'll give you a discount for the cost of the sales tax. They're not writing a check to the IRS for you. right? That's exactly the point. That's how I always interpreted Trump's wall. I thought that, or Trump's comment about the wall, about Mexico paying for it. And so I think that people are intentionally, they intentionally take when he's saying things like that, especially the most egregious examples is when he's obviously joking, right? Like when Hillary deletes subpoenaed emails. By the way, the media could have cared less, right? Whatever. No big deal. Let's have Trump delete subpoenaed emails. Let's see what happens there. They would go berserk. They would call for his head. Should be impeached tomorrow, right? But when Hillary did it, they didn't have much to say about it. So when Trump goes on in a rally and he's joking about it, he's like, yeah, Hillary deleted her emails. Hey, Russia, if you got our emails, why don't you release them because the FBI can't find them? It was clearly a joke. And people were like, oh, Trump just told Russia to hack Hillary. He just told them. That's clearly a joke. Trump said, I could shoot someone on Broad Street and no one would care. Oh, see, he's saying that his supporters are so crappy. It's clearly a joke. He's clearly exaggerating. But people, when you just discredit yourself, when the media or other people are taking that and trying to make it seem as if he meant it literally, it just makes you look foolish because the average person knows, like, dude, okay, he wasn't saying that. Which gets to the ultimate Trump comment, right? The grab him by the P word thing. Was it uncouth? Yeah. I can't tell. I will say this. It's so frustrating to me. I can't tell you how many people I personally know that have said crap like that in private, drinking at a bar with me or here or that, said vile, disgusting things. Maybe not exactly that. Some worse, some not so bad. But along that line, have said things like that or bragged about sexual conquest or things like that. Who I have seen when they're in public say, oh, guys, don't talk like that. That's not locker room talk. That's terrible. That's a terrible thing. I've heard women say far worse things than what Trump said. You know? And we have to pretend like, oh no, guys don't talk like that. Or any guy it's only a guy problem. Women would never talk like that. And any good guy wouldn't talk like that. Or they wouldn't listen to someone talk like that. It's total garbage. It's garbage. The guy is a brag. Like, by the way, I'm not the type of person, I kind of roll my eyes. Anyone who knows me personally, two of the things that I think is funny, like, I hate, like, the tough guy mentality, and I often like to pick on it. Like, I used to have this guy that I worked with that he would tell me stories like this. He'd be like, hey, man, yeah, what'd you do this weekend? I'd be like, went out, you know, had fun. We did this, and this, you know. I beat Mario Kart or something, you know. I'm pretty lame. Anyways, this guy'd be like, you know what I did? I went up to this frat party, and there were these two twins there. They're models. I'm like, oh, man, I hooked up with both of them, and, you know, giving you all these details. And one, it's probably garbage. But second, it's like, I don't care at all. I don't care. Or, oh man, I went out and got in a fight and I just whooped up on like 10 dudes at once. It's like, yeah. And so and if you know me, you might like chuckle because if you maybe heard me do this before. One of the things I'll do all the time, someone tells me and I'll be like, yeah, I hear you, man. Yeah, that's cool. You hooked up with those two chicks. They're models. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, this weekend I actually went to a party and there was this chick. She wasn't that good looking, but I started talking to her and yeah, she totally rejected me. Or, oh yeah, you beat up all those dudes? Yeah, I went to this party and I found like the scrawniest dude I could find and started stuff with him and he just knocked me out in like one punch. So that's my way of saying like, dude, not that impressed with your sexual conquest story or your tough guy fight story. I just don't care. It's fine. I don't think you're a crappy person. I'm just like, it's not interesting to me. It's just not, you know? I'd rather hear about the giant fish story. You caught a giant fish or you shot an awesome deer or, you know, the engine you put in your truck. I don't know crap about that stuff, but at least I find that entertaining, you know. So that's just who I am. But that's, you know, people talk like that. And I'm sick and tired of seeing people I know, you know. It's the same with the Kavanaugh business, you know. Now, again, the first Kavanaugh accusation that he covered a woman's mouth and, like, that sounds like attempted rape to me. That's a serious, serious issue. But, like, the second story, he whipped it out at a party 40 years ago, that's a huge deal. That means he should never be allowed to have public office or have, like, he should basically be shunned from public life. I've had people tell me that I've seen this happen at parties with them. People that, you know, so it's just like, whatever. These double standards, this fake, like, virtue signaling for the rest of the world, it's so stupid, and it's applied to Trump all the time. How many people in Hollywood, you know, get the vapors talking about how vile Trump is, that signed petition for Roman Polanski to get back in the country, who anally raped a 13-year-old girl, drugged and anally raped her. They don't think that's a big deal. But Trump saying grab him by the P word. In fact, hardcore feminist icons like, what's her name? I can picture her face. Oh, man, I'm jumping. The Devil Wears Prada lady. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about, hopefully. She stands up and says, Roman Polanski is God. Or no, that was Harvey Weinstein she called God. Sorry, there's so many molesters and rapers that they praise all the time that I forget them. Now, we know that child exploitation and sexual aggression or sexual crimes is rampant in Hollywood. We know that. In fact, there was a law passed in Hollywood that said agents and people that represent child actors have to go through FBI screenings. I read an article at one point. Maybe I'll do a video on this and put the article up there. That says that despite that law being put in place, it's still something like 95% of all agents and people that work with the child actors haven't gone through the FBI background check. Just an FBI background check. I had to go through one for the job I have. But nope, they can't have that. And so we have all these moral people are moral, but how many people in news studios, right? These news agencies. Then it turned out top people there were rampant in their alleged sexual abuse. But they get in their moral high horse about how horrible Trump is. They didn't care when Clinton was credibly accused of rape. In fact, they went after the people that claimed that they were sexually assaulted. By the way, the Monica Lewinsky thing, I don't think consensual sex is a big deal. However, the attacking her afterwards, that's a bigger deal. But the actual consensual sex, I don't care. It sucks, it's immoral. Cheating on your wife, regardless if you're the president or not, is a terrible thing to do. Or your husband or whatever. I don't care your sexual preference, orientation, or gender. It doesn't matter. Cheating's wrong, But consensual sex isn't... I thought that was stupid that it was such a big deal was made out of it. JFK, allegedly banged Marilyn Monroe with his brother, and everyone was like, hey, yeah, So it's just a different time we live in where everything... But, the same people that defended Clinton. And now you see them kind of distancing themselves from Clinton. Whoa, because it's not politically expedient now. The Clintons are losing their power. Now all of a sudden they could be discarded like rubbish. Or how about the foreign press, right? Like, okay, I'm not going to get into talking about Pizzagate. This is great. I never thought I'd talk about something like this. I wasn't really big into it. And my big thing about Pizzagate is this, especially people that aren't publicly known figures like that have ran for office, but even them, before you accuse someone of being a sexual monster, you better damn well have proof. And so when you're saying some pizza place is front for pedophilia, and you're posting the address and posting the names of the people that own that, and people are showing up trying to do something about it, you better damn sure be you're right. That's like, I argue, and we criticize the left all the time for this. Oh, he's a Nazi, he's a Nazi. Well, what happens? You say that to the wrong person, they're like, yeah, I'll take care of this Nazi. Same thing with, he's a pedophile, he's a pedophile. You say that to the wrong person, they're going to be like, I'll take care of it. Pedophiles are evil. So you don't say that stuff flippantly. I was against that. But let's not kid ourselves. On the other hand, sexual assaults and misconduct at the highest level of politics in this country and others are rampant. Now what do I mean by rampant? I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that it's bad. And that's not just pedophilia, I'm talking sexual abuse in general. And that's the way it's always been. People with power tend to, gravitate towards having power over people. And one of the terrible, disgusting ways to do that is through sexual power and sexual exploitation. And so we see things like Epstein, supposedly having sex with minors at Orgy Island, which, by the way, Clinton flew on his plane I don't know how many times. Sometimes not even filing paperwork, but not allowing his Secret Service to go. Now, Trump was friends with Epstein at his golf course, and I've heard claims that Trump flew to Orgy Island with Epstein. I don't know if that's true or not. He certainly didn't fly as much as Clinton. And by the way, I'm not saying Clinton's guilty of pedophilia if he went to that island. I don't know. They should be innocent until proven guilty. But all I'm saying is it has been proven in a court of law that this guy had sex with minors and exploited minors sexually, and he got, like 6 months? And the fact that he was buddy-buddy with all these powerful people, that isn't a reason to scratch your head? And then, of course, we see, like, Jimmy Savile in the BBC, who was a child presenter who was friends with all these politicians. And there were allegations, one of my favorite people, Johnny Rotten, there's audio of him in 1979 like on getting interviewed, like, yeah, by the way, you know, Jimmy Savile, we know he's into all kinds of crazy sexual stuff, but you're not allowed to talk about it. Turns out he's proven right. But they never said anything until Savile died. And then there were all kinds of investigations saying that high-level politicians were involved in this and covered it up. And, you know, this crap happens. So for them to get the vapors more about Trump saying, you know, I'm not really trying to get into that discussion. I'm just saying, all of these institutions that claim to be like these moral arbiters of like what Trump said, that locker room talk was so terrible. It was so terrible. Well, clean your own closet out first. Because it's not just locker room talk, it's actual sexual violence that's occurring. You know? But we have to pretend that they're the moral arbiters. You know? It's ridiculous. And sometimes it's the very same people. Like George Takei, right? You know? Which, you love a good George Takei. I'm terrible at impressions, but, you know, Sulu from Star Trek. He's one of the biggest Trump haters out there if you watch his Twitter feed. Yet he was accused of sexual misconduct with a younger guy. So Trump's words were reasons to disqualify him. But Takei, and who knows, again, it was only alleged. I don't know that Takei's guilty. But Takei would demand a fair process for himself. He wouldn't say, don't vilify me until you know all the facts. But with Trump, just his words were enough to say this. And you know, in Hollywood, and particularly comedians, that's the worst. The comedians that are like, oh man, I can't believe Trump said this. It's like, dude, have you heard some of your acts? Like, I know how comedians talk behind closed doors to each other. It's foul, repugnant stuff. They're pushing the line. Like, that's what they do. And I just get so, like, you know, everyone that's so fed up with that comment, it's like, dude, he didn't say he raped people. It was locker room talk. He said, they let me, if you want to get technical about it. Now, there have been accusations that Trump's done crappy stuff sexually. That's fine, if you want to focus on that. But again, that's all alleged. That hasn't been proven. But that could be serious. I'm with you there. But this talk, do you want your president saying that? No. But it was a private conversation he had with someone where he's just being a braggadocious moron. Not the type of conversation I would, like, if he said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, cool. You're a cool guy, man. Woo! You know, and I would just roll my eyes. But, and not because it was dirty, because he's bragging himself up. That's why. The dirtiness I wouldn't mind. It's the, I'm such a cool guy attitude of it. I'm such a sexual, you know, prowess machine. That's the part I'd be like, okay, man, whatever. But we're acting like that's the end of the world. And it's just, again, it's disingenuous. Now, I'm sure there are people out there that are Puritans, that don't talk like this, that have never heard talk like that, and they're outraged. Okay, fine. But I know for darn sure there's a lot of people that are faux outraged about this. So, yeah, that's basically my feelings on how did I get from that to talking about Mexico paying for the wall. But it will segue into the other topic I had. Kind of, this won't be a 2-hour one, I don't think so. If anyone else has any questions on the wall, go ahead and put them down, and I'll try to get to them later. The other point I had or issue I had that I wanted to talk about was I did a thread on this on Above Top Secret, and I have done a video on this in the past, but I think it's worth talking about, is the need for civility in political discourse. Now, people, it's hard to exactly articulate what I'm saying. I'm saying you can't have insults? No. Am I saying that you can't joke or have fun? No, I'm not saying that. The issue is this. You talk to people about, we can all agree that the political discourse has been getting crappier in this country, where you kind of have this tribalism where, and if you're on an online site like Above Top Secret like I am, it'll be something like this. Like, I'm right-wing, I'm biased, I admit that. There are people on the left wing that I think are similar to me in that they'll joke around or whatever, but they're ultimately trying to like have a discussion, you know? And I think there's a lot of people that are doing that, and in the center or that don't care in general. And so like you'll have a thread, or you'll have an issue, or you'll do a video or whatever, however, or you're just talking to someone, but it's particularly true online, I see, where you'll be something like, you know, oh yeah, did you see this new stuff? You know, like I'll say, let me go through Trump's speech line by line and say what I think about it. You know, you spend a bunch of time working on this, and within 30 seconds, someone just reports, like, post, you're an ass, stupid right-wing nut job, or something like that. And it's like, okay, that's a troll. Like, I understand that. But that there's beyond trolling, there's a group, well, not beyond, there's a group that's not quite trolling, but is kind of just as bad. And this is on both sides. The trolls I get, because they're doing it for laughs or whatever. That I get. And I don't mind the insult, don't get me wrong. if you're out there and you're trolling me, here's what I ask. Like, please don't physically harm me or anything like that. And don't try to jeopardize my livelihood. But if you just want to call me names, I'm all for it. All I ask is try to be funny and original. That's... Comedy solves all wounds to me. So if you say something, if you're going to make a weight joke and you're just like, you're fat, that's not as good as coming up with like an actual clever insult about me being fat. That would be much more appreciated. So yeah, I don't care about the insults, whatever. But you have these people that are truly trying to impart their opinions. So they're, they might disagree with you, but they want to get out there, this is what I think on the issue. And presumably, not only that, they want to get more people to agree with them. And so they would say, you would think you would say, well, here's why I think you're wrong, blah, 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 blah. But instead what they'll say is like, you're wrong, you always lie, that's not the way it is. Or you're a terrible person, or, whatever, insert insults. And they're not saying that to troll. Like, they truly believe that. Or they're still trying to persuade people to their side. And what I'm trying to tell people is, this goes with that kind of what I would call uncivil discourse, which is different than just insults, right? Because you could insult someone and still be having a productive conversation. I could be like, you moron. No, it's actually blah, blah, blah. That's different than just being like, you're a moron, everything you say is a lie. You could actually even be polite, or you could be like, no, I don't agree with you. I just think that you're so biased. Everything you say is a lie. All Trump supporters, it's not their fault. They're just terrible people. Let me rephrase that. You could say all Trump supporters are insert expletive, or you could be polite about it and say all Trump supporters are, just tragically misled. So I just don't listen to them. That's not that insulting. That's not that rude, but it's still, that's the idea I'm criticizing. Or the counter could be, you could be far more insulting and be like, you stupid son of a, blah, blah, blah. Use whatever insults you want. Here's why you're wrong. X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. Even though that seems more insulting, I'm actually more okay with that because at least you're, going on with the points. But in general, you should try to be more civil. So the problem is you try to tell people why that type of stuff's immoral. The same with advocating violence, which that's obviously, to me, the same idea except to a further extreme. And you say, look, it's immoral to do stuff like this. You don't want to say all Trump supporters are 10-toothed morons like Rick Wilson and CNN laughing about it. You don't want to say all Hillary supporters are, psycho, rabid, whatever. You don't want to say, Gillibrand's a stupid bimbo. You don't want to say, Trump's just an orange-haired a-hole. Like, that stuff's not you don't want to do it. It's just, so, like, there's a moral level to it. It's just like, hey, you shouldn't do that. Particularly then when you get to the extremes of the worst rhetoric, and certainly once you start advocating violence. It's not morally defensible. You wouldn't want people to do it to you. Now, again, if it's for comedy, it's different, right? To understand this. I'm talking about people that are being serious. Like, I was accused when I said this Rick Wilson guy on CNN, they called all Trump supporters 10-toothed racist. Oh, you don't have a sense of humor. He's not joking. That's the difference. If Chris Rock gets up and says, these Trump supporters that want the wall, these 10-toothed racists, blah, 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 I'll laugh at that. If it's funny, if he's working it into a funny joke, And I'm not insulted personally by what Rick Wilson said. It just lets me see into his character. The fact that he says, it shows that he's actually a racist, that he's a bigot. That's all. And the fact that CNN, laughed about it, it shows they are as well. That's it. That's fine. I'm not personally hurt. Glad you could be honest. You want to be a racist? You want to be a bigot? Please. Your insults don't affect me. Come out with it, though. Let people see who you are. It has nothing to do with not having a sense of humor. I don't mind the jokes. I don't mind anti-white jokes, anti-fat guy jokes, anti-men jokes. Great, fine. But when you're not joking about it, it's not that I mind it. It's just like, okay, that's a different deal. Having a sense of humor isn't the same thing to deal with that. But the problem is when you make the moral argument, a lot of people aren't convinced. Like, let's take to the extreme, like advocating violence. And I've talked to people like this. It'll be like, a group like Antifa that'll be like, well, I feel they're morally justified because the groups they're fighting are so bad and they've done terrible things to me or terrible things to friends of mine that it's justified using violence on them. Or they might do terrible things in the future, if they haven't already. So I feel justified. We're not going to get anywhere. Like I already explained earlier, once you start talking morality, you don't get anywhere with people. That ends the debate. If I say you're a scummy person for believing that, they're going to be like, okay, screw you. I'm not going to listen to you. So my morality and my sense of, and let's be honest, and to some extent, morality is subjective. Now I know we should all agree on a reasonable code of morality on some things. Murder's bad, rape's bad. Okay, we get that. But then there's other things, right, where based on our subjective situation, we could say, well, in this context, if someone steals to feed their family, is it immoral? Some people may say, yes, it's a gray area. It's not all black and white. So the point I'm trying to make then is there's a second level to this. And that is a strategic level. If you're really trying to get people to agree with you and your opinions and your political ideology, are these insults, is advocacies for violence a good thing? And I would argue no. It is a bad thing. It is an absolutely terrible thing because it turns people off. If you're, I joke with my friends all the time. I'll say, I don't know why the Democrats don't hire me. Because I could tell them, like, dude, you're going about this all wrong. Stop saying Trump supporters are racist. Stop saying they're deplorable. Stop saying they're uneducated. Stop saying they're committing suicide like this, what's his name? The congressman that thinks Guam's going to, Hank Johnson. Oh, Trump supporters they're killing themselves. They're uneducated. They're alcoholics. They're drug addicts. Yeah, that's not helping get Trump supporters on your side, dude. That same guy, by the way, also famously asked someone, he was worried that if we stationed too many troops on Guam, the island would tip over. That is a person in Congress. I love Hank Johnson because I'm trying to run for Congress, and I feel like if a man who thought that an island could tip over if you have too many people on one side could win a congressional seat, then this fat guy at least has a chance, right? That's my feelings on it. But instead of making those arguments, saying they're 10-tooth, they're racist, or deplorable, why don't they say, this would be my message in a nutshell. We get that a lot of you people that voted for Trump voted for someone like him because you feel like the system has ignored you. And you're right. We haven't been doing a good enough job. We should be focusing more on you people that are working. We think we need to focus on all Americans. We didn't come to the states where, like, a lot of these flyover places, but we didn't go to a lot of these working class states and to address the people. And you're right to have rejected us. Here's what we think we're doing now that will help you and why that's better than the Republicans and Trump's plans. That's it. Now, is that going to get every Trump supporter? No, but it might get a percentage. They're definitely going to be more willing to listen than if you're just screaming at them. It's the same the other way. If you're just like, oh, everyone who hates Trump's a or whatever that be. I don't get that meme so much. But they're all just stupid. They all hate America, blah, blah, blah. Even if you believe that, strategically by saying, if you're trying to convince an audience and you start up with, well, whatever, you hate America, do you really think you're going to persuade them of anything after that statement? Of course not. So you're trying to, even if you believe that, you keep it to yourself, basically, and you're like, for the purposes of this and trying for persuasion right now, this is how I'll dress. And the other reason is you could be wrong. Maybe they don't hate America, even if you think they do. And now you've just lost a potential, your assumption has cost you. Let's assume you're dealing with someone, like, let's say you're from that angle, right? And so you're dealing with the person, and there's two positions. Either one, they hate America, or second, they don't, right? And again, this applies left and right. It doesn't matter. But we're just saying you're a person on the right now, and you're talking to someone on the left. So they hate America and want to see it be destroyed, or they don't. You have 4 potential scenarios. You treat them as if they don't hate America, and you're wrong. Right? So if that's the case, that's choice 1. You say, let's start it this way. You treat them as if they do hate America and they actually do hate America. That conversation is probably not going to yield very much other than maybe catharsis because you have fun screaming at them. Second, you treat them as if they hate America and they don't. Well, now you just lost a potential reasonable person that could have been persuaded to your side. You've just lost that. You were wrong in your arrogance, and now the conversation that you could have potentially had, even if they wouldn't have agreed with you, it could have been informational. You could have actually had a meaningful conversation with someone. You've lost that. Now, let's say you assume they don't hate America, and they don't. Well, then again, now you've had a reasonable conversation with someone. That's a good outcome. Let's then go with option 4. You assume they don't hate America, and they actually do hate America. Okay, you've wasted your time. But the only potential way to have a good outcome is the assumption that they don't hate America. Every other outcome, if you start on the assumption they do, you're guaranteed to basically not have a productive conversation. So you should strategically act as if they don't. And it's the same way. You assume all Trump supporters are just racist rednecks. Okay, The only way you could possibly have a productive conversation is to assume they don't. Even if you're wrong and it is a racist redneck that you're talking to, that's a moron, okay, nothing lost. But once you assume that they are and you treat them as such, there's not going to be anything productive gained. The other thing to say about this is, you're not just, especially if you're online, but not just online, if you're having a conversation at a bar or in public or with your family around the dinner table or anything, your audience isn't just the person you're talking to. Other people are watching. They see how you carry yourself and they see what you're saying. This is particularly true, like, I'm doing an online video so I have 5 people watching right now, but maybe 3 other people that aren't on here right now watch, or maybe only 2 or 3 are talking, but the other 3 are silently watching, etc. There could be, that's just 5 computers. There could be people in those rooms, more than one person watching a computer. I don't know, right? Like, but if it's just me, like say last night I did a video with my buddy Drone Tech on his channel. It's not just me and him talking to each other. It's everyone listening too. And especially if you're on like Facebook or you're on like Above Top Secret like I am, or any other site like that where you're talking about things like this, you might be dealing with someone who's like a total jerk and just wants to make insults. If you reciprocate, everyone sees that and they're like, whatever. So there's basically, the way I look at it, there's 5 groups of people that we could all agree with. There's 5 different types of people that could be our audience. And this is obviously a gross oversimplification, but you'll get the idea. There are people that basically extremely agree with us. And then by that, I mean, no matter what tone you take, they're going to be like, yep. So if I come out and I'm being polite to you and I'm like, well, Trump's the man, and or, you know, Trump's really good and here's why, X, Y, Z, they'll be like, yeah, Rob's doing a good job. Or if I come out and I say, F you, Trump's awesome, screw off, they'd be like, yeah. Doesn't matter what tone I take, they're going to agree with me. And then you have the people on the opposite end of that spectrum that no matter what tone I take are just going to disagree with me no matter what, right? So it doesn't matter if I'm polite or insulting or advocating violence or not, they're just not going to agree with me, right? The chance of, although there is a chance, but the chance of you changing either of these groups' mind is pretty low, right? You're probably, you might make little inroads, and you should give them the benefit of the doubt anyways, for the reason I said before. That's the only chance you'd have, like, a productive, persuasive conversation. You could have a productive conversation just screaming insults at someone. It could make you feel good, but it's not going to work for persuasion. That's all I'm saying. But there are 3 other groups, right? And those 3 other groups are people that kind of agree with you, people that kind of disagree with you, and people that are in the middle, either indifferent or they're on the fence. And that's true if you're a Trump supporter, if you're a Trump hater, or if you're somewhere in between. You're still always going to have those 5 groups. The people that are basically really agreeing with you, the people that really disagree with you, that kind of do or kind of don't, and those in the center that are indifferent, unknowledgeable, or ignorant of your position, or indifferent in your position, or in the middle on your position. Yeah, kind of like getting called a stupid redneck. Yeah, like, silly, the reference that Ken's making there is on Above Top Secret. There's a poster who goes by the name of Silly. Her name's a little longer than that. But she makes good points sometimes. You could see once in a while she'll like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a reasonable point. And I still have discussions with her based off of the idea that I know she's capable of having these good points and reasonable discussions, even if they disagree with me. But she doesn't have a lot of people that take her seriously that are in the middle or on the right, because she's making so many insults. Like, she called me a stupid redneck just based on my image. She didn't hear me say anything. She didn't know it was me. She just saw a picture of me and was like, that person's a stupid redneck. Now, how seriously do people take that? Like, not very well. And so now when she's making good points, people are like, I don't even want to pay attention to your good points because I know how you act elsewhere. And so it affects her ability to persuade people to her side. Now, maybe she doesn't care, but she should care. If she really believes in our positions, she should understand that there is an audience and there are people watching, and that she's negatively affecting people that may have elsewise agreed with her. And so again, it doesn't matter if you're on the left, right, or center. You'll always have those groups. People that really agree or disagree, kind of agree or disagree, and the people in the center. And so you're really targeting those middle 3 groups. And so we already discussed how there's an audience, right? We know that there's an audience more than just the person you're talking to. And so the people in that audience that are in those middle 3 groups are the people you're trying to reach. And my contention is, by acting with civility, or, just being a good person, basically. You can have insults if they're funny and not, like, super mean-spirited and things like that. People could tell. And those people in those groups, as a whole, it is a better policy for persuasion to take the manner of civility than things like being uncivil or advocating violence. You will turn way more people off than you will get to agree with you using those strategies. And so if your interest is trying to persuade people, which it should be, even if you disagree with me, it should be. Like, you might be a socialist Bernie supporter. Don't defend Antifa. Don't be calling for violence, even if you somewhere deep down believe that. Like, I guess, always be truthful. That's most of the time be truthful. We should all try to be truthful. I get that. But if you're trying to persuade people, you're making a huge mistake. And then, once you realize that, then you could go back to the morality argument. Well, why is that? Why do people in the center tend to be like, ugh, he's advocating violence? No, I'm not cool with that. Maybe it's because it's not a very moral position. Do you see what I'm saying? And so, but you should look into it that you're trying to be an effective persuader. If that's your goal. If you're trying to be a troll, then who cares? Right? Then be as insulting as you want. But if you're trying to persuade people to your side, and so a lot of us online discuss. Now I know, and I was told all kinds of stuff like, that's not what these online discussions are for everyone. I agree. Some people just want to straight out troll. Some people, they wouldn't consider it trolling, but they just want to vent or something. That's fine. I get that. Or they do want an echo chamber. They just want to shout their feelings and want a bunch of people to be like, yes, I agree. I'm almost the exact opposite. The discussions I love are when people disagree with me. Particularly like when they prove me wrong in a factual sense, not just in a, you're a fat schlub, I don't want to listen to you sense. But when someone really proves you wrong, you're like, oh, wow. Like, that's good. Difference is good. Argumentation's good. It strengthens my opinions. It gives me more information. It allows me to adjust my opinions. It's a great thing. Provoking critical thought's not trolling. Like, that could be another thing. You could be being satirical or being insulting to make people think something. That could be as well. But the problem with that is you're not going to persuade people to your side very often with that. And if you are, plus satire and irony is difficult. Like, for example, we see, did you see the case of this guy? They're being satirical and ironic, but they're not being uncivil. It was these 3 people that did these, they worked on colleges and they did all these fake studies where they submitted to all these academic papers where they would it was insane. It's hilarious. There's a video out there, but it was like stuff like they took like Mein Kampf, Hitler's Mein Kampf, and basically changed some of the words around to, instead of talking about Jews, talk about like men. And it basically, it flew. This academic, paper was like, yeah, we'll run that. Or another one they did that, they basically advocated that if men started putting sexual toys inside themselves, it would lead to further acceptance of the transgender movement. And like just making stuff up, and people are like, yeah. And their point was like, even obvious satire like this is now taken seriously because that's how far the discussion's gone. So you have to be careful when using irony or satire because people might take you seriously. And I've seen this. You could just, you might say something like this, like, oh, what's that? You type something like this on a message board. The guy advocated to, stop giving, that we need to crack down on food stamps. Well, clearly he's a racist and someone should like beat the crap out of him. People be like, yeah, that's right. And you're like, whoa, I was being ironic, but your irony, it doesn't come off. So you have to be careful with that. But again, the point I'm just trying to make it with the civility is just, if you're trying to persuade people, again, if that's your goal, or you're trying to have a serious discussion like that, then the civility will always play better than not. And the responses I get by this, particularly I got a lot of responses by Trump supporters. And the reason is, I think they're more likely to have a positive discussion with me about something like that because I tend to agree with them on most issues. So they will, a lot of them disagreed with me. They're like, but the other side's just, they hate us and they've called me vile names and I'm tired of it. And it's like, yes, but my point is, you're not just talking to those people. Like, yeah, you're probably right. No matter if you're polite or not, that side's not going to listen. But the people in the middle will. And, even if they don't, what are your chances if you just start throwing insults back of that ending up productive in any way, shape, or form? It's not. It'll just make you look bad. And so you have to, that's one of the things, you have to know how people will judge you based on stuff like that. It's not fair necessarily, but that's just, that's how it'll go. So, I don't see the strategic benefit in a persuasion sense of being crude to someone. Now, the counter to that would be like, well, look what Trump did. But Trump, there's a difference between Trump saying, like, screw the PC culture and then him being petty and incivil, right? So, for example, when he's like, S-hole countries, it's like, yeah, that, first off, that was leaked, so that wasn't cool, because the Dems just wanted to make him look like crap. But that wasn't him, like, it wasn't a couth way of speaking, but it wasn't, like, a terrible insult. But compare that to him calling, like, Stormy Daniels horseface, or going after people. It's like, what is the benefit of this? Is there someone that was on the fence who was like, I'm considering voting for Trump. Let me turn on Twitter today. Oh, he called that porn star he cheated on his wife with horseface. Yep, he's got my vote. But there are probably people that are like, I don't like this. I'm just going to tune him out. So that's the type of stuff I'm talking about. Being against political correctness doesn't mean just being like, totally throwing civility out the window. It means speaking your mind. You could be harsh. You could have insults. But if you focus on that's not necessarily the best thing. Trump was the... Yeah, I mean, Vincier, I in a sense, I agree with you. See, what did Trump represent? That's just it for me, right? Trump's like an avatar. He represents. It's like that. It's like in the Batman movie, where it's like you can't be. Where Alfred's explaining to Batman, he's like, "You're not the man. You're the symbol," right? And that's true in a lot of things. I remember watching this documentary, and it was a black guy that was like the main figure in this documentary, and he was. I can't remember who did it. It was great, and I bring up the guy's race because it actually is relevant to the story. And he's going back looking at the history of Lincoln. And he starts off explaining to you, like, how in his family, being African-American, like, Lincoln was the best president. He freed the slaves. That was crucially important to him. And and so he does all this research into, like, who Lincoln really was. And he's looking into it. And it turns out he starts to see that it wasn't just quite that black and white. That actually Lincoln wasn't like super noble. It wasn't like Lincoln was just like, no, the slaves must be freed. It was basically like, he was like, this would strategically benefit the North right now, so that's what we'll do. And so, and there were other examples of Lincoln maybe not being the total best person in the world to African Americans. And so he asks himself this question at the end. He's like, what's more important, the literal person that Lincoln was or the symbol of what Lincoln was? And he's like, I still choose to enjoy the symbol. And that's true of all of our heroes. That's one of the things with like the tear the statues down movement. Like, we are going back through history and we're nitpicking people's negative traits out. And we're saying that somehow that diminishes their accomplishments. So you see this with the founding fathers or people like Lincoln, And I tell people, as always, I tell people on the left, like, be careful what you wish for. Because, 50 years from now, we could hear calls for removing Martin Luther King's statue. Someone that I agree is a great person, a great hero, a great figure in this country. But he was an adulterer, a womanizer, treated women like crap, as sexual objects, so the left will say, right? So where's that movement? We going to start to see that? Does that mean MLK's accomplishments? Does that mean, all the great words he says and the great marches he had, that none of that matters? Of course not. But that's where we're going. We're nitpicking all this stuff out. But you can apply that in real time, too. Trump, the person, is less important to me than the movement that he represented. And that's why when I say, if Trump committed crimes, especially, like, he should be held accountable for them. Now, to proportion, and my big issue with, like, the investigations is, and by proportion I mean, if he committed campaign finance reform, okay, what's the going rate for, with that, impeachment? Jail time? No, that's not what happened with Obama and his crew. That's not what should happen here. And it should also be an even standard applied to all sides. So if we're going to start applying laws against lying to the FBI to people on Trump's side, why aren't they applied to people on Hillary's side? Well, it's because the establishment doesn't like Trump because he's a potential outsider. That's why. Never forget, Chuck Schumer told you exactly why all of this is happening. The leader... I don't know how many times I've said this. I don't care what you think of Trump or Hillary or Republicans or Democrats. Throw that all to the side for a minute. The leader of one of the major political parties went on national television and warned the leader of another, don't criticize the intel community, they will get you. That is wholly unacceptable. And true, by the way. That's the country we live in. Is anyone okay living with a country where shadowy, unelected officials can't be criticized by the most powerful elected official in this country? They have to be fearful of that? That is ridiculous. So that's what Trump represents. Stopping that for me. And stopping this identity politics and political correctness as well. That's what the representation was. But if he committed a crime as an individual, particularly a serious crime, he should be held accountable. That's why it doesn't bother me. He is just the symbol right now. When Trump goes away, the movement will continue. It might not be as strong, but he did what I wanted him to do. He came in, and I'm not one of these 4D chess people. I think Trump makes mistakes all the time. Trump benefits because his opponents are so stupid and arrogant that they shoot themselves in the foot all the time. So Trump looks like a genius oftentimes, but in reality, I don't think he is a political genius. I think he's a smart man. I think he was a good businessman, etc. But I think a lot of these people give him way too much credit. Like he's playing moves out 2 years in advance. He's playing 4D chess. No, I don't buy that. It's just the other side continues to make blunders. A lot of it out of sheer arrogance because they control the narrative, because they control the mainstream media. What they don't count on is like people, alternative channels like me. I'm saving the world with the 8 people watching me. Now, like clearly I'm excited, but there are people like me that are reaching a lot of people. And not just right-wing people on the left as well. But the gatekeepers of the media, the mouthpiece for the deep state and the establishment's losing control over the story. That's why you see them pushing so hard for tech companies to censor fake news. They need to have control over that. They don't like the fact they're losing their monopoly. But I feel like the cat's already out of the bag. That we are becoming so intercommunicated and so unreliant on mainstream news that it's losing its power, and no matter how much they try to tighten their grip, I feel like things are going to start to slip through that they're not going to be able to control. So, but anyways, the 4D chess thing, I think I feel the same way about Bernie. Just by them getting to where they were as potential outsiders. Now you might say, Trump's not an outsider, or Bernie's not an outsider. I don't care at this point whether or not they really are outsiders for sake of this argument. But they were seen as potential outsiders. The establishment Republicans and Democrats didn't want them because they looked like people that maybe would rock the boat. And so they couldn't have that. And so the mere fact that they got to where they did exactly what I wanted. The number one thing I wanted out of whoever won the 2016 election was to out the deep state as being corrupt, as basically being the two parties are basically the same that are the establishment, and the media is corrupt and just their mouthpiece. And boy, have Bernie and Trump done that in spades, regardless if they intended to or not. Look at how Bernie was screwed by the Democratic Party. Look at how the Democrats don't even care. Like, if you were a Bernie supporter, like, how are you not still livid about that? You're still voting Democrat, I bet. After you think they're ever going to really push for anything you really want? Of course not. You think anyone, like, they'll leave Cortez get up there and say, that's one of the things, like, I think Cortez is ridiculous. I think her positions are Orwellian, draconian nonsense, that Green New Deal. Oh, my God. But I think at this point, she's still coming from a place of what she thinks is to help people. She's just naive. And they don't want that. They'll smear her just as well. You're already starting to see it. She'll get smeared too, just like Bernie did. They're not going to leave those people get real power. Are you kidding? And to the extent that they ever do end up with real power, it's probably because they've sold out, or because there's other checks and that there's other things occurring that these powers allowed them to get in that real power, that they'll then make it look bad. Like they'll have the stock market collapse or the economy collapse as soon as they get in there and do something. Now, I'm not one of these super conspiracists that's like saying there's shadowy rooms of people smoking like skull and bones and stuff like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that until we end this corruption of what the intel and establishment community is capable of, then we're not going to see them. Anytime a potential outsider gets in there, they're going to be gone after tooth and nail, just like Trump has. You know, and again, I'll say it was the Washington Post. If you read enough news, you can kind of tell the context. Sometimes I feel like when I'm reading a story, you could kind of like see the facial expression of the person writing it. And I know the person writing this story had a big old grin on their face for the Washington Post because they hate Trump. and it was something to the effect of every area of Trump's personal life now under investigation. Boy, that's strange. Like, if we take Schumer's comment, don't go after them, and they'll don't go criticize the intel community because they'll come after you hard. To just a year and a half later or 2 years later, every area of his life under investigation, and no one sees the problem with that. Oh, he just must be the most corrupt person ever. Not like Hillary or Bill. Was every area of their life under investigation? No. Was their lawyers' offices being raided in the middle of the night? No. In fact, their evidence was being smashed with hammers. They were destroying subpoenaed evidence. No problem. No problem. Again, I've gone over the Mueller investigation ad nauseum. If you're interested, I spent about an hour talking about it on my friend Drone Tech's channel yesterday with him. But yeah, that's kind of what we see, like the double standard there. We know that these intel agencies were going after Trump, and that's the reason I voted for him, to out that. In addition to the political correctness and this identitarian politics that's being pushed, both of which are just tools also of those same people. They want to separate us into tribalism, right? Like, one of the things I dislike is like when it's an appeal to authority thing, where it's like a celebrity will say something. You know, LeBron James comes out and says something, and it's like, oh yeah, he's wise, he knows what he's talking about. Or Kanye on the other side. No, doesn't mean they can't be wise. It doesn't mean they can't be saying important things, but the appeal to authority that they must know because they're a celebrity, I find that ridiculous. Having said that, though, one of the things, ironically, from a basketball player that I actually just was like, yeah, that sums it up, was Charles Barkley, who is very left-wing politically, wouldn't agree with me about anything, and by no means do I agree with a lot of what Charles Barkley says politically, but he, came out and was like, why does the black community keep voting for Democrats? They never do anything for us. At least make them earn your vote. And he's right. That's what identitarian politics is about. Just get a group, move on to the next group. So, that's why they'll talk ad nauseum about, the best example is gays. People, not LGBTQ, gays, particularly gay men, is the best example. And they're starting to see it. Where, like, you're a gay man and you voted Democrat. And don't get me wrong. I've been for gay marriage. I'm for gay marriage. Which I could get into if people were interested in hearing my thoughts on that. But I've always been for it. And so if you're gay and you believe in gay rights and gay marriage, then there's probably a decent chance you would vote Democrat based on that. Who could blame you for that? Now, certainly there were the log cabin Republicans who were gay that weren't Democrat. But, nonetheless, but at this point, you got Trump during the national convention. He's flying like the rainbow flag. He doesn't care. He's not going to vote to outlaw gay marriage. Doesn't care at all. It's a settled issue at this point. So what is the Democratic Party doing now for gay men? Well, you have things like the Orlando nightclub shooting in a gay nightclub, right? And because of intersectionality, gay men are oppressed, or gay people are oppressed, and Islam's oppressed. And so basically you had a bunch of people after that, a bunch of gay people actually started to get firearm training, buying firearms and things like that in Florida, because they're like, wow, we're being targeted by, a religion that's way worse than Christianity. By the way, the Democrats defended gays against when they felt Christians were going overboard with them. But now that it's Islam, it's like, shut up. And that's basically what they're telling. Stop it. Don't rock the boat. They're oppressed just like you. Focus on the Christians. Focus on the white men. Focus on the oppressors. And so you end up with these crazy situations where women's groups are defending Islamic regimes. Linda Sarsour is a leader of the women's movement. Someone who told a woman that was born in a predominantly Muslim country, a son, Hirsi Ali, I have trouble pronouncing her name. She's a great person who actually suffered female genital mutilation, that she should lose her vagina for not being a woman. She said that to someone who said all kinds of anti-Semitic things. She's the leader of the women's movement. It's defended things that are close to Sharia law. That person that's the leader of the women's. How does that happen? You have all these strange bedfellows because, now again, I'm not saying all Muslims are terrible. I personally know good Muslims. They're some of the best people I know. I don't know a lot of Muslims, by the way. I live in rural Pennsylvania. But of those I've met, I've liked more than I've disliked, So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like, it's not, you're like defending, you're not going to criticize Saudi Arabia. It's the same type of mindset that'll allow you to go out and criticize a song like Baby It's Cold Outside. But Beyonce and Jay-Z are national heroes. They're great people. They're American poets, if you listen to some people. Listen to some of Jay-Z's lyrics. Snoop Dogg's cool. He's invited to the Oval Office to hang out with Obama. Listen to some of his lyrics, what he says about women. I don't care what Jay-Z and Snoop Dogg say about women. I don't take it literally. I don't want them censored. I even like some of their music. But they're clearly, objectively saying way worse things about women than Baby It's Cold Outside. Why do they go after one and not the other? It's because the craziness that your mind gets warped when you start playing these identity politics. And so you're starting to find out you have like groups like a lot of like Dave Rubin, for example, which I recommend checking out Dave Rubin's channel. He's fantastic. But he was on the Young Turks, as left wings as it comes. He's a gay man. And he was like, you just wake up one day and it's like, they're basically telling you as a gay man, like, shut up. You had your time in the sun. You're a Democrat now. We got you. We got this group. Now we got to move on to the next group. And it's like, that's what it's that division. And so you don't even realize, like, you end up with all these crazy situations, like, which group does illegal immigrants compete with economically the most? African Americans. But yet somehow you still, it's in that, because of the way the order of importance at this point. Yeah, Dave Rubin is gay. And of course, that's, by the way, never mind. Yeah, David, I love that, though, that Dave Rubin's gay, you don't even notice. I think we've come a long way as a society where that could be the case. Being gay doesn't mean, like, you have to be super flamboyant. No one cares if you're super flamboyant. I don't care anyways. But, yeah, you can just be gay. Doug Stanhope used to have a joke. He's like, you want to do something for the gay community? He's like, just get in an airplane and just talk like a normal dude, like about football, drinking your scotch or whatever, go on, and just have a conversation with 2-3 people on the plane, just normal. And, like, right when you get off, be like, hey, by the way, I'm gay. He's like, just because that might show one kid out there, like, you can be gay and you don't have to be, like, in the parade, like, super flamboyant. You could be a normal person. Come off. It doesn't have to be the center of your identity in other ways. So, yeah, Dave Rubin does that very well, I believe. But, hey, be yourself. Whatever your identity is, be it. I don't care. As long as it's consensual adults, don't care at all. But anyways, you see that, like, these how they're basically advocating positions that hurt the other group. So the way we have right now, illegal immigration is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the flavor of the day or whatever, where that's the issue that matters now. So they're going to push that. And if you're African American, you're like, wait a minute, like, why are you so concerned about illegals? Look at, like, how we have these inner city communities that are struggling, particularly in California or other places where they're constantly, the local and national politicians from there are advocating illegal immigrants and the importance of it. What about like people in our community? Why? Shut up. Don't criticize us. Be quiet. You saw when what was the proposition originally in California, legalized gay marriage? Was it Prop 18? Something like that. Anyways, it was some proposition. And it lost. And the reason it lost was, like, the African-American community voted, like, 80-something% against it. And they were shocked. How can that be? Like, they're all liberals, right? They're all oppressed. They all have to be together. Well, no, it's not that simple. But they do a really good job using the media to try to hammer that issue home. And how do they do it? What's one of the tools they use? Political correctness. It was like I started talking about when we were talking about the idea of looking at facts, like demographic crime statistics. Political correctness tells you can't look at some of those. It's racist to even say it, right? You can't say, well, let's look at inner city crime statistics. Nope. That's racism. No, it's not. It's facts. You could use those facts in a racist manner. I could say, look at inner city crime statistics. This proves black people's inferior. But that's garbage. That's racism. That's not what I'm saying, right? You fairly could call someone out for saying that. But to just say the facts are racist is ridiculous, And it silences, that's a form of political correctness. Or, this is how we get in these ridiculous situations. That it keeps the conversation from happening. The idea is, like, debate and conversation is a great thing. When someone tells you can't say something because it's offensive, your gut reaction is to be like, there must be some truth to this. That's why the way to solve racism isn't to shut up racist, it's to let them speak. I remember, I live in rural Pennsylvania, and I remember one of we used to go to a town around here, a real small town. My grandpa was in a nursing home. And you would go through this town or whatever, and I would go 2-3 times a week to visit my grandpa. And I remember one time the KKK was having a rally in this town, and there was like 5-6 people. I don't know how old I was, maybe 14. But I remember I was like, what's going on here? And it's just, you couldn't really hear what they were saying. We're just driving through. But there was 4 or 5 of them, and they're on the courthouse step. And they've got a permit, and, that's free speech. They're allowed to talk. There was probably in this little town that I would, if you asked me, I would say no one has ever marched for any political purpose in this town particularly. There was probably 60 people booing them. But they were allowed to speak. Them speaking brought more hatred to their cause than if they would have just been silent racists that people didn't know about. It was like, wow, we have racists like that in this community? That's terrible. So it actually did more for the opposite position. And that's the truth in general. Just let them speak. But as soon as you start silencing people like that, then what you do is you go to the next group. The people that aren't really racist, but maybe, aren't necessarily the greatest people in the world. And then you go to people that aren't racist at all. And then you go to people that not only aren't racist, they're anti-racist. They just disagree with you on some things. And the next thing you know, the people in control are censoring all discussion. You look at like Richard Spencer and people that are in like the white nationalist movement, they'll tell you straight up. The 2 biggest recruiting tools they have are 1, censorship, telling them they can't speak and things like that, or punch a Nazi, that type of thing. Just saying it's okay to just go punch those people. And the second thing is groups like Black Lives Matter. Identitarian politics on the left will eventually breed the exact same identitarian politics on the right. And it'll be a never-ending cycle. I think that both sides are stupid. I think the identitarian politics on both sides is absolutely ridiculous. And so, but the politically correct movement, it drives people to that. When you can't say things, people are like, wait a minute, I can't, and you see this all the time. Like, I'll see people say this. Like, I can't even say that there's 2 genders. I can't even say that. It's a biological fact. I can't say that. And so then, let me give you an example. This is a better example than what I was just saying. So, like, there was this thread on Above Top Secret that I was participating in, and it was about this guy in Australia. I think his name's Contrell or something. I know nothing about this guy. And someone made a thread and was like, hey, this guy's making some good points. So I watched the video, and it's just some guy, and he's like, Sudanese immigrants, like, our government's trying to basically cover up the fact they're committing all this crime, and we're tired of it, and the police aren't taking it seriously, and so we're going to have this rally, come if you agree with us. We need to do something about this problem, right? 2 sexes, I guess genders is maybe not the correct word. Whatever, it's all garbage anyways. I don't really care about the semantics of it. Anyways, so that's this argument this guy's saying. Whatever. Could a Nazi make those arguments? Yep. Could a non-Nazi make those arguments? Yep. I didn't see any evidence. It really wasn't that interesting to me. I didn't respond to the thread. It was just like, okay, whatever. But then the next person says, or one of the next people says, my girlfriend went to that rally. It was 100% Nazis there. 100%. And so for you people defending this guy, it's disgusting. He's a disgusting Nazi, blah, blah, blah. Well, someone else had posted a video then of the rally. And it looked to me just like a bunch of people saying, hey, we're worried about migration. No one's taking it seriously. They're committing a lot of these crimes. We need to do something about it. And then the guy's even like, is anyone here a Nazi? Hey, you over there, Asian guy, are you a Nazi? And everyone like chuckles. And I think maybe you do hear someone say like, yeah, Nazi, we're Nazi. Or Sieg Heil or something like that. That's like joking. Don't joke around and say Sieg Heil if you're at something like that, because people will take it to show that you're a Nazi. Another example of irony not working all the time. But I looked at this. Could there have been Nazis intermingled? I suppose. They weren't admitting to being Nazis. They were claiming not to be. I didn't see Nazi memorabilia. And certainly I didn't see any proof whatsoever that 100% of the people there were Nazis. It seemed like seemed like a crowd of people that were concerned about something. You might not agree with what they were concerned with, but 100% Nazi, if you're going to make that accusation, you better have something to back it up. And so, as the thread goes through, people start to post really crappy stuff about the original guy. He had said at one point, apparently on Facebook, that pictures of Hitler should be in every classroom. That proves he's a Nazi. I'm like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Like, was he joking? I don't know. Or was he saying that they should be up to show what a bad guy is? I don't know. And then more kind of stuff came up. He had committed crimes like stalking or something. The guy seems like a crappy person. Now, I still don't know if he's a Nazi. Certainly there's a chance he is a Nazi. But to label everyone in that group, it's not, if I didn't know, someone else could have saw that video and went to the rally and not knew that secretly this guy's a Nazi. If he starts screaming Heil Hitler or something, then and you hang around, you probably have a problem. But if he doesn't do that and he's just talking about the issue, just because he's a crappy person doesn't mean that people can't be concerned about the issue that he's concerned about. That automatically makes them Nazis. But the thing is, yeah, right, I am recorded saying it. Yeah, well, you wouldn't be surprised if someone takes that out of context. For the record, I hate Nazis. It goes without saying. They're just whiny identitarian politics on the right side of things. They're disgusting. They're the lowest of the low. Anyways, but anyways, the point I'm trying to make in all of this is the fact that you besmirch 100% of these people as Nazis, or you tell them they can't talk about this problem, that allows an actual crappy person to then kind of gather these people to kind of more of his side. If the conversation was allowed to happen freely, then people wouldn't go to a rally that was put on by some guy that, unbeknownst to them, is a really crappy guy and maybe a Nazi. That's what happens. These groups, the Nazi-type groups, the white supremacists, the white nationalists, all these type groups that are terrible, that are disgusting, that I hate, are actually increased in power by trying to censor them and by trying to censor other people and having political correctness. It drums up support of these groups, which then drums up the extremists on the other side. And so it's a cycle, and it works like that. The best cure for bigots on all sides, racists on all sides, that again are all disgusting, are that you just let them talk. Just, okay, what do you have to say? And instead of just, and again, keep in mind, like I was saying about civility earlier, do you think it's better to leave Richard Spencer talk and to be like, here's why your points are dumb? Or not even dumb. Here's why I disagree with you. Here's the danger that what you're saying is leading to. Here's why you're wrong. Now, you don't have to have, if you don't want to have a discussion with him, that's fine. But do you really think telling him he's not allowed to speak or running up and punching him is going to hurt his cause? No, it's going to help his cause. So you're just like, fine. Now, does that mean, you're an administrator at a school, you then should obviously let him come talk? I'm not saying that. But he should be allowed to speak to the people that will allow him to speak. And allowing him to speak doesn't mean that you agree with his views or somehow pushing them. Quite the opposite. If you're so sure that his views are repugnant, which they are, then let him speak. And if you have a debate, I've known people, well, not known personally, but I've seen channels where people have debated people like Richard Spencer and said, I think your ideology is disgusting. I think it's terrible. Here's why. And then they were told afterwards, oh, so you're a Nazi sympathizer because you talked to that guy. No. I'm doing my best to stop that ideology. That's why I did talk. If everybody just shuts him out, then you're literally creating an environment where people don't understand how stupid and hateful he is and will start listening to him on their own time. So, yeah, that's why political correctness... now, I wasn't talking about the Unite the Right rally. This was a... rally in Australia, apparently. I know little about it. And I don't know migrant crime figures in Australia. I'm literally ignorant of the situation. I'm just saying that I understand you could potentially be concerned about something like that and not be a racist Nazi. And when you say everyone is a racist Nazi that's concerned about that, it makes it more likely that people that have those concerns end up being recruited by racist Nazis. Unwittingly, most of the time, I would say. Right, that's exactly right. The way to beat bad speech in debate, right? So I was in policy debate, and I talk about it a lot. I seem like I crap on it a lot. I really like policy debate. It's super left-wing. It's to the left of, I was doing policy debate 2003 through 2007, and then I coached and judged a little after that. I was seeing things in policy debate that you would then 10 years later see in the actual universities, the Berkeley type thing. It was the left of the left. The majority of it's far left. If you were a centrist, you were considered extreme right wing, in the debate community. And so you saw all kinds of crazy stuff. One of the things that's cool that drugged me to debate or encouraged me to do debate in the first place was it's an activity where by its very nature you could debate about the rules of debate or what the debate should look like. It gets very meta. You end up talking about like what you're saying now is good for debate or it's bad for debate because X or Y. Anyways, you would have people say all the time, they would say this, they would say, the way you're debating right now would justify someone coming in here and being racist, debating a racist plan. And I would say, oh, okay, that's fine. You should be allowed to go in and say a racist plan. Do you know why? Do you know what would happen? You would lose because racism's not a good idea. So it's going to be very hard to defend. Now, yes, if you're an expert level debater and you're debating someone that's nowhere near your caliber, you might be able to like win a plan that says we should bring back slavery. In the context of the game, you could win that, but it's just a game. It's like if you're playing Call of Duty and you're playing as the Germans versus the Americans, you're kicking butt, you're not really saying, oh, the Germans, yay, Nazis. That's not what you're saying. You're playing a game. That's what debate is. It's a game, right? But it's a laboratory where I thought you should be basically able to say anything in the abstract. You shouldn't be able to say, I'm going to punch you in the face, or you personally should die, things like that. Like, that's over the line. That's getting into the personal. But you should be able to say, which I heard many times, kill all men, or kill all women. You can say kill all men. You cannot say kill all women. You should be able to say all black or all white people are horrible, terrible people leading to the destruction of the world, which you hear a lot of times. You should be able to say all black people are the same, which you're not allowed to say. You see what I'm saying? That's a clear double standard, but my point was like, I'm not taking it personally. If you walk in and you say, hey, men are evil, kill all men, here's our plan. I'm not taking it personally like if I lose the round, you're going to put a knife in my throat. That's not it at all. It's a game. You're making a point. Like, we argued one year, which I vehemently disagree with, but we argued like preemptive nuclear strike on China because China's eventually going to be our geopolitical rival. Blah, blah, blah. So that was our argument. Does that mean in real life that I hate the Chinese or that I'm advocating bombing China? No. That was what drew me to debate. It was like, this is so cool. You could say anything. It wasn't like I had a hankering to go in and say racist stuff. That's not it at all. My coach was pretty cool. He basically allowed me to say what I want. I never said anything close to that. But the idea was you could say anything. And it was like, sometimes you'd hear really cool stuff like crazy conspiracy theories, moon Nazis and nanotechnology and gray goo. And you would hear this stuff. It was interesting. It was fascinating. Like just to hear, like, it was like good fiction or something, you know? I thought it was fun. I liked debating that. I didn't mind debating the kill all men. What I did mind was that it got into the world of you personally as a white man suck. That was a little... I thought that was kind of the ruination of debate. But that was the idea for me. And so when people would say, well, the way you debate would justify someone coming in and making a racist plan, it's like, yeah, okay. That's exactly right. And they would lose. Leave some moron team come in and say like, yeah, this year we're advocating slavery. How well do you think that team's going to finish at the end of the year? Pretty poorly, which I think is a good thing for the debate community. You could be like, yeah, we had this team that came in and argued racism, and basically they lost every time because it just goes to show again what we all knew: racism's bad, it's stupid, it's not very defensible, you know. But instead, that's just a metaphor from what I'm saying, or an extreme example of what I'm saying is leave them speak. You know, don't have a problem with it. Yeah, I know at least one person that was on here before was in debate with me. There's a lot of problems with debate. There was a lot of good things about it. I made a lot of good friends. Because everything was so left-wing, and I was kind of more right-wing. I was definitely more like straight-up libertarian back then. But it helped me be who I am, argumentatively alive, and it helped to have an entire group of people that was just totally against your ideology over and over again. It helps you become better at defending your positions and who you are. It's one of the things you see. Do you ever notice, like, you see these Hollywood people and, like, they're just, like, it's one point they just become a train wreck, like Johnny Depp or Leo DiCaprio. My favorite is, like, did you check out the Sam Harris when he's on Bill Maher's show and they're talking about Islam and violent Islam, and Ben Affleck's just like, that's racist. That's racist. Like, no, you shut up. Who made you an authority on Islam? It's like, well, yeah, that's what I am. I am actually an authority on this, you know? and like, you could watch that and you're just like, wow, how arrogant of Ben. How could he do this? The reason that all these celebrities are like that is they just have a bunch of butt kissers around them their entire life. Like Tom Cruise. How can he arrogantly get on TV and say the crazy stuff he's saying about, like, the mental health industry? You know? Not that there aren't criticisms of the mental health industry, but you know what I'm saying in general. It's like, whoa, this guy's a nut. What's he talking about? You know, or Ben Affleck or Leo DiCaprio, all these people. It's because everyone around them's just been like, yeah, you're the man. You're right. Yep. Oh, yeah, you're the man. You got it, man. Woo. Yeah, you're smart. Yep, you did it. You're smart. For years and years of their life, they've heard that. And so they haven't, you know, it's like you have an intellectual sword and theirs never been sharpened by resistance. And so it's just dull. It's just, there's nothing going on there. And so when you're in the opposite position, where you're constantly like, dude, everything you believe sucks. And it's like, okay, one, they might convince you, right? They might, some issues, it might take away some of the garbage from your thought. It might chip away at that. But the ideology you still have, it's honed sharp, you know, because of that. And that's why I love talking to people that disagree with me. That makes you a better person. It makes you be able to defend your positions better or get rid of your positions that aren't effective. That's what diversity is about, ironically. Right? When you hear phrases like the cream rises to the top, that's the idea. The idea of diversity, which I find totally ironic, it has nothing to do about your groups. All of the stuff we talk about diversity, like, oh, there's so many women of color there, that's so diverse. Or look at it, we have, you know, in our company, we have 6 different religions represented. That's really diverse. We have people from all over the world here. It's a very diverse. All of that is secondary, right? Diversity, when you're looking at things like skin color or gender or religion or geographic location that people are from, or, you know, wealth, the amount of wealth they have and all this stuff, all of that is just a stepping stone to diversity that matters. The diversity that matters is a diversity of opinion, of ideas. So we assume this person looks like this person's from Africa, they're a woman, they're, you know, Muslim, and this person's a white guy from rural America who's Christian, and the woman's gay and the man's straight. And so based on all of those differences, that's diversity, and that's going to be good. But maybe they exactly agree on everything. You know, other than that, like, their preferences or their skin color, or their background, or what their religious choices are like, yep, we all agree on almost everything. That's not diversity. That diversity doesn't matter. That's just superficial. The real diversity that matters is having different opinions, having conversations, having debates, having arguments. That's the diversity that matters. That's the diversity that makes us better and makes us stronger. We have a bunch of different opinions. Now, a lot of times coming from different areas or being a different ethnicity, that could in fact be a sign that you will have a different set of opinions because you're bringing different life factors into this. But what we see in, like, academia, they scream, or in the job market, they scream diversity, diversity, diversity. And what they really mean is we want all people that have left-wing ideology, but all look different. Like, that's nonsense. That's not diversity. They're not helping everything. All of the arguments of why diversity is a strength don't apply there. If everyone agrees, it doesn't matter that you have a rainbow hue of skin color. That's not doing anything for you. That diversity isn't helping. If that rainbow hue of skin color happens to have a bunch of different diverse opinions, now you're onto something. Now, there still has to be a cohesiveness. There has to be something that brings everyone together. You know, so you need some cohesion. It can't just be total diversity where it's like, you know, this person is diverse and they think the best way to help our company is, you know, actually by doing more viral marketing campaigns. And this person's very diverse because they want to burn our company to the ground. Like, yeah, clearly that diversity is not helping. But you see what I'm saying. If you all have some kind of cohesion and collective goal, then the diversity of opinions is good. That's why you hear this trope, diversity in America. What makes us strong is our diversity. What are you talking about? The more diverse, the better. Like, well, wait, we still have to have an identity. You have to have a national identity. We all have to have a collective goal. And for me, the national identity, and that I think we should all agree on, is like individuality, personal liberty, innocent until proven guilty, English common law system. Those are the kind of things. Hey, what's up, Jerome Tech? Those are the kind of things to me that keeps us together cohesively. What keeps us together in a country where you have people that celebrates diversity? If you don't have any national pride, if you say that even the idea of nationalism is bad, or that we should have open borders, or the U.S. sucks, we're this terrible place, and the rest of the world, if that's the idea, what's keeping us together then? And then what you see happen is you break down into tribal groups then. You just go with the people that are like you, and other people go with people who are like them, and you're not reaching towards a common goal. That's why our politicians should be focused on the citizens of this country, regardless of, I don't care what your skin color or your sexual preference or any of that, your religion. None of it matters to me. What matters to me is you're an American. Liberty, personal freedom, innocent until proven guilty. The concept that you as an individual can achieve by you working, and you're judged on your merits, not in your group's merits, right? Not on the original country you came from. And I mean this, I do not care. I don't care at all, again, if you're a legal immigrant versus me. You are just as much of an American as me. And I did a video on this a long time ago. Some of the best Americans some of the best Americans I know are immigrants, legal immigrants. They're working like 18-hour days every day. They passed like a civics test to become a legal citizen that who knows if I could pass. I don't know. They exemplify exactly what it means to be an American to me because they've seen the system where it's not based on the individual. They've seen the system where it's more of a collective idea, where you can only get so high and there was so much corruption and things like that. And they knew that even with all the problems we have in our country right now, which we certainly have a lot of them, here's a place I could go and be judged on my deeds and be judged on my work ethic, and I could make it there. That's what America is. That's the idea for me. That's what brings us together. The rest of it, your skin color, where you came from, I don't care. Now, you might say, why aren't illegals included in that? Because we shouldn't be focused on people of other countries. Our politics, our government should be focused on the people in this country, regardless of skin color. It's not a race thing like, oh, you only want to help white people? No. It should be focused on everyone in this country, regardless of all those factors. We shouldn't be concerned with helping the rest of the people of the world. If you're concerned about that as an individual, more power to you. You could be helping, sending money to other countries, helping. But the U.S. should be taking care of its own first. Our policy should be nationalistic. And then that also means we shouldn't be intentionally screwing with other countries. I get that. But the problem is, when you take these goals, right, and I was talking to a friend about this the other day, it's like, yeah, but you feel bad about a lot of these countries in the rest of the world. Well, we get back to what we were talking about before. It's an argument based off emotion, and pragmatically, we can't help everyone. I honestly went through a point in my life where I got depressed because you start to realize, like, who am I to sit around here and I have this computer or whatever, I got all these luxuries in life, I'm not, by no means am I a wealthy person, but I understand my privilege when it comes to, the majority of the people in the world alive today, let alone in all of history. I understand I'm very privileged. And you start to get it, you can get really depressed thinking about it, who am I to have all these benefits when there are people starving to death? But what you realize is you can't, when you try to fix that problem, when the government's going and try to fix that and try to give aid and stuff, oftentimes it makes the situation worse anyways. You can't force a better country on other people. Democracy promotion doesn't work. We're going into Iraq and we're going to make them democratic. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. The countries have to pull themselves up. Again, if there was a more developed country, or you were some kind of intelligent alien species that came and viewed the United States during the Industrial Revolution, you'd be like, how sick is this? Look at how they're overworking these people, blah, blah, blah. The country, but if you would have came in and tried to change, the people of this country, the very ones you're trying to help, would revolt against you. Shut up, it's not your business. The countries have to change themselves. And so it'll always be worse. And it's not the role of our government to be doing stuff like that. So I don't care. But all of that was a long spiel of the cohesion of us. Once you have that cohesive, we're all working together for the better of this country and all the people in this country, and the ideas of personal liberty and freedom. It doesn't mean you can't advocate social welfare programs. That's cool. You could do that as well. But we have these ideals, right? You were judged as an individual. It kind of starts with the base of that. That's what made America unique. It was the first best example of a country saying, this is a country based on individuals, based on individuality. That's how we were able to achieve the success we did. And that's why I favor policies that favor that. So as long as we have that idea and we judge people as individuals, even if you advocate social safety nets and stuff like that, that's fine. And the diversity is good. We need a diversity of ideas. That is a good thing. But just the superficial diversity of skin color or religion, whatever, means nothing to me. Nothing at all. Diversities of ideas matter. And the same people screaming diversity the loudest, it just so happens are saying, oh, and we don't want any diversity of ideas. We want to control what you say with political correctness, control what you say with identitarian politics, and etc. So, yeah, that's my feeling on that. That was a big long rant on why I voted for Trump or what I expected to get out of him. But yeah, that was basically it. The last thing I was going to say, it kind of segues into this. It was the only other category I had. It's just more on the idea of comedy. And like I already kind of illustrated, the idea of being civil in politics doesn't mean you can't be funny or you can't be comedic. And it doesn't mean that we should like get the vapors over rude jokes or something like that. Comedy to me is the best way, when you're talking about diversity or people of different backgrounds, to me, comedy is the best way to bridge that gap. There's all kinds of like ways to bridge that gap. Food, for example, right? Like, I'm fascinated. I used to watch Anthony Bourdain, you know, and there's all kinds of other shows where these people just travel the world eating. And it's fascinating to me to watch two people that know nothing about each other, that come from like almost alien worlds to each other, sit down over a meal and like understand each other. Music's like that too. Art, you could see like that. But humor is another good one. And I've told this story before, but there's this postmodernist Zizek. I find him fascinating. I disagree with a lot of what he says. But he used to have this movie. The movie still exists, obviously, but it used to be on Netflix. It was called A Pervert's Guide to Ideology. And he's a crazy postmodernist. Like, I think he's a Marxist. He would call himself a Marxist. But I saw, he did this lecture once where he's telling this joke and he's talking about this other professor. And I forget exactly where he's from. But if you listen to Zizek, you can tell he's like definitely, he has the craziest accent. It's so nasally. But anyways, long story short, wherever he was from, there was a lot of like ethnic conflict and there was a lot of like like kind of racism basically, or bigotry based on people's ethnicity. And so this guy he ends up working with is from a different ethnic group than him, and it never comes up, obviously. They're professional, and he's like, so they like hang around for like a week or 2 weeks, and it was a working relationship, a professional relationship, but you could tell there was something missing. And he's like, so then finally this other dude picks him up one day and's like, they get in the car and it's quiet, like they're driving to wherever they have to in the morning, and the dude he's like, I can't remember the specific joke, but basically whatever Zizek's ethnicity is, he tells this horribly crude joke about people of that ethnicity. It'd be like a Polish joke or whatever like that. And they laugh for like 10 minutes. And Zizek's like, what he was saying to me was, I identify with you so much as an individual and like you so much that we could get this uncomfortable collective idea of the traditional racism between these groups. We could laugh it off. And that is absolutely true. The more you could laugh at yourself, the more you could laugh at the idea of making fun of the groups that you belong in, the more likely you are to be a reasonable person, to be able to talk to people of all kinds of different backgrounds. Humor bridges that gap more than any of the other things I was talking about. And self-depreciation also. Like if you're, again, looking at this, it's two ways. The moral or the what makes you a good person argument, and then just the success argument. I think it's good to be self-depreciating in the moralistic stance, but probably more importantly, or easier to convince people of, it's definitely more strategical. People like that. People like when you have a sense of humor and when you could laugh at yourself. It lets people know you're not uptight. It's why the opposite of, you know, think about it. When I was talking about earlier, what story do you want to hear? The guy that comes up to you at a bar and just spends an hour and a half telling you how they're the toughest guy in the world, or they're the smartest guy, or they hook up with the hottest chicks and blah, blah, blah. Do you want to hear that? Or do you want to hear a guy that's able to joke about himself, or girl, whatever, it doesn't matter, that's able to make jokes about themselves? Almost always it's that second person. You're like, yes, there's someone I can hang out with. They're self-depreciating. You know they're not uptight. You don't have to walk on eggshells around them. You don't have to worry about like being super politically correct. That's great. Like so we need to, and I think that I bring it up because you see more and more the attacks on humor. You saw the video I did on Kevin Hart, or the video I did on the writer for SNL that got basically pulled off the stage at an Ivy League school for an Asian community comedy night and things like that. And to me, once we could no longer laugh, we're a stone's throw away from violence. Like, if we can't laugh at each other, if we can't laugh at ourselves, once you censor that, once you take that out, and you start to see it, like comedy now, it can't be, to me, comedy is, it's pushing the envelope. Always, you know. And again, I told this story the other day, but it's like Patrice O'Neill, who's a fantastic comedian. I love Patrice O'Neill. Like, I heard him explain it best, and I think it was like on CNN, and he's saying, look, you've heard a really funny joke that maybe was at the expense of a group that you didn't care about, and you thought it was really funny. When you hear a joke that offends you, those two jokes came from the same place. It's not that the person telling him was okay on one hand and then they're a terrible, evil, malicious person on the other. That's what comedy is. It's trying stuff out. You know, and great comedians will tell you, like, you know, the vast majority of their work fails. They're constantly testing new stuff out. You're testing new stuff out. And, you know, so there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that aren't funny. There's going to be things that are offensive to people. But that's okay. That's your job. You're pushing that boundary. You're constantly pushing it. And you could tell a lot of societal truths in it. You know? You're more likely to convince a racist white person that their racism's stupid using humor that shows that, like Dave Chappelle, right? One of his, I think it was the first show he ever did on the Chappelle Show. I forget the guy's name, but the white or the black KKK guy that's blind, so he doesn't know he's black. That is a far better way to convince people, like, dude, this is why racism's stupid. Like, you look at that and it's hilarious. You're like, I get it. You know exactly what he's saying. You get the message there. But if, like, we're getting to the point now where we can't have any humor that could be edgy or offensive, we say, no. You can't have that. And now humor is, you see these people that, like, I forget the woman's name, but they talk about her comedy special that won all these awards. No one's even laughing. It's just her being like, I refuse to be funny, and I used to make jokes about the fact that I'm a lesbian, but no more. It's horrible and it's offensive, and I need to stand. And everyone's like, that's not comedy, right? And when you take that out, when you, like, you know, Norm Macdonald is another one of my favorite comedians. He was talking about Letterman, and they were like, I think Larry King was interviewing me. He's like, why did you think Letterman was the best? And he's like, all these comedians want to think they're the smartest guy in the room. And they want to show everyone that they're smart. And people don't want that. That's not what Comedy's not about having people applauding for you. It's having people laugh. And he's like, whereas Dave was the smartest guy in the room, but he realized that wasn't what it was about. So he played like he wasn't the smartest guy in the room. And that's what made him funny. He didn't go for the cheap, oh yeah, good point. He went for the laughs. And Norm's absolutely right with that. I'm not saying, I think Norm has more, I like Letterman, but I think Norm has more appreciation for Letterman than I do. But what Norm's saying there is absolutely right. That's what comedy's about. And we're changing it. We're leaving society gradually influence us, you know, saying what can be funny and what can't. And, you know, going after comedians that maybe had a certain opinion. You know, we can go after Kevin Hart for his words he said about gays, but all these, like, kind of feminist left-wing comedians like Amy Schumer or Sarah Silverman or, what's that other lady's name? I can't think of her name right now, but when they made almost the exact same type joke, that was okay. That was allowed to fly. And it's just this subtle way of they're trying, there's an attempt they understand the power of comedy, and they're trying to, I don't know if censor is the right word, but like basically censor. They're basically trying to eliminate humor and laughter and use it strategically only to benefit their side. And that's a really dangerous thing. And I think but I'm optimistic. I think you're starting to see people get fed up. Because what happens is, you go after the fringe people first, right? So you go after, you know, the odd comic that no one really knows about that, you know, made a bunch of racial jokes. Screw that guy. Okay, we'll go after him. Then you go after Louis C.K. because he did some bad stuff, you know, with the Me Too stuff, which I won't even get into. But he did that, and now he's making fun of the Parkland people. Okay, you go after him. But then you go after Kevin Hart? You know, now you're starting to cross into a line where this is a dude that, you know, families sit around and watch his movies. He's a funny guy. I love Kevin Hart, by the way. I think he's great. And so that's like, okay, him too? Who's next? What type of comedy next? You know, when will it be censored? Are we going to get government approved list? Not even government. That's the worst part. This isn't government enforced censorship. It's cultural enforced censorship. You know? A show I just started watching, it's called Black Mirror. It's fantastic. It's got I wasn't fully certain what it was. I knew it was kind of Twilight Zone-esque, where it's each individual episodes. You should check it out. Not all the episodes are my favorite, but I just watched one where it had to do with, they found a way to, basically there's these robotic bees because the environment, blah, 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 and the bees were dying out, so they made robotic bees. Well, this cynical man programs an app like on Twitter to be able to have these bees kill people in like this super horrific, painful way. And the way it decides who to kill every day is you basically, whoever gets the most hashtags kill. So it'd be like, you know, hashtag kill Rob. If my name came up the most hashtag kill Rob, I'd be the one to die that day. And it's a commentary on, right, the idea that we have this kind of social censorship, that you have all these social people saying, not literally kill people, but you deperson people basically. Take them out. It's the mob rule, right? Screw the mob. Be the edgy comic. Be the edgy comic against me. Be the edgy comic against Trump or white people or fat guys or guys with beards. Guys that grow up in rural Pennsylvania. I don't care. It's fine. Push the envelope. Be funny that way. That's great. You know? But don't be monolithic. Don't be safe. Another great Norm Macdonald story. He used to do this show. It was called Last Comic Standing. And it's basically like American Idol, but it's for comedians. And so they get up on stage and they kick like one off a week. I never watched the show, but I've seen this clip. And this comic stands up, and his entire bit is, I think he's gay, and his bit's about, you know, I had people tell me that being gay is wrong because of the Bible, but if you're going to quote from your holy book, I'll quote from mine, Harry Potter. And, you know, they'll say, blah, 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 Leviticus chapter 2, 3, you know. I say, you know, blah, 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 Goblet of Fire chapter 7, you know, and stuff like that. And he's just basically crapping on religion for 5 minutes. And the judges was one judge I didn't recognize. And then Roseanne, this was before she was depersoned, and Norm Macdonald. And Roseanne's like, I just loved it. I thought it was hilarious. And the crowd was laughing and everything. And they get to Norm, and Norm's like, yeah, I didn't like it at all. And the guy's like, why? And he's like, because it's safe. He's like, you're in the comedic world. You're in this like kind of cultural world where it's easy and safe to bash Christianity. Everybody does it. And he's like, I just think it's easy. I didn't think it was especially funny. And he's like, if you really wanted to be edgy, you would have stood up and defended Christianity. And Norm's absolutely right. Because that's what comedy should be. It should be pushing these boundaries. You don't have to be vulgar to do it. And you could do the safe stuff once in a while. But you're supposed to be pushing edges in some way or another. Making people feel uncomfortable. So, who did I watch just the other day that was talking about this? They were like, you know, Bob Newhart, of all people, you know. I don't know if I've ever heard the man swear. But his comedy was all about making you feel uncomfortable. These situations just build up and up and up and just made you uncomfortable. And then it was funny, you know. It was polite. It wasn't vulgar. But it was pushing that edge. It made you feel uncomfortable. Sitting in a room with 100 people that agree with you and crapping on people that aren't there, that's, you know, that's not original. That's safe. No, I'm not saying censor that comedy. Say what you want. But that's what we're seeing. Only that type of comedy is acceptable now. That's why you turn on the late night shows. Every single one of them have the same take. Trump's a buffoon. Trump's a buffoon. Ha ha ha. When Obama was there. What a great, noble person. What a great, noble person. Like, the way they've weaponized comedy is unbelievable. Do you remember when Jon Stewart, like, grilled Crossfire? It was a big moment. Everyone was like, what? The man, Jon Stewart. You're the man, right? He grilled Crossfire because he said that it was, you know, trivializing what debate should be and things like that. To an extent, he was right. But the idea of at least having two people that disagree, look where we've got now, John, right? Now, instead of having two people we disagree, we got a panel of 8 people on CNN calling people toothless rednecks racist that agree with Trump, right? That's where we're at now. Geez, it'd be all right at least to have a voice that would maybe say no once in a while. So even though Jon Stewart was making some valid criticisms, whatever. But in the end, what's more dangerous? Like, yeah, having a fake media like that is very dangerous. I spent a lot of time talking about it today. But what about the comedy, John? What about pretending to be objective and using comedy as a strategic weapon to be political, to favor one political establishment over the other? Because that's what comedy's become. Like, name one late night person that's not just crap political humor now. You got Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, even Conan does it. I used to love Conan. Even Conan, it's just like, a lot of it's just bashing Trump. You know? It's boring now. Stephen Colbert. Like, and you'll laugh. You're like, Trevor Noah, you know? All of them. It's the exact same take. Samantha Bee. The exact same take from all of them. So it's like, now once in a while, like I said, they'll have a joke that I still think's funny. And I'm not saying take them off the air, but it's just like, this is it. It's monolithic. This is what comedy is. Where's Lenny Bruce? You know? And I've always felt like one of the, maybe this wouldn't help my chances politically, but I have felt like this a lot in my life. I was a big George Carlin fan, and my brother bought me this book by George Carlin that I read once, and at the foreword of it, he talks about how he doesn't want to be called human, or something to that effect. I'm butchering exactly what he said, but I think I'm getting the crux of it. And he says, all this stuff. He's like, here's all these problems with humans, greed and blah, 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 and violence and this and that and tribalism. And then he's like, at the end of it, he's like, maybe someday they'll fix all of that and they'll be totally perfect. And guess what? When that day happens, I still don't want to be a human. And what he's saying is, I'm a contrarian. I like being different for the sake of being different. I feel like that some ways too. I cheer for the underdog. That's one of the reasons I like Trump. How could Trump be an underdog? He's the president. He's a billionaire because everything, our entire cultural institutions are out to get him. And that's where I find myself. It's like, that's why I like comedy. That's what I like in that comedy. When it was the authoritarian religious right saying video games were causing people to kill people and, trying to censor comic books and music, I was there saying, no, this sucks. But now we got the left trying to censor everything. And I'm still here saying, no, that sucks. But I'm the one who's changed. If you ask a lot of people, I'm against it. I'm against that censorship. I want an open dialogue. I want comedy to push the edge. My avatar on Above Top Secret's Bill Hicks, and I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, Bill Hicks would have hated Trump. Bill Hicks would be disgusted by you. He would be ashamed of you. I don't care. You know what else Bill Hicks would hate? People using his name to try to shame people into opinions. He'd think you were a bootlicker. I'm an individual. I don't care. I could like Bill Hicks' comedy knowing that he would disagree with me. That's fine. I don't care at all. But nowadays, now it seemed like you have to fit in this nice little neat box, particularly when it comes to comedy. You can only find certain stuff enjoyable or acceptable, or it's offensive, or this, that, or the other. George Carlin I like George Carlin, but he would have hated Trump and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't care at all. Like, I'm tired of that. A lot of my favorite comedians, heavy left-wing people. Lenny Bruce would have been left-wing, making fun of religion. For those of you that don't know Lenny Bruce, he's a hero. Lenny Bruce was arrested for obscenity over and over again, just for cursing and stuff, making fun of Catholics, things like that. Talking about sex in his comedy act. And he got arrested over and over. And his stance was like, you will not censor me. You will not silence me. And comedians used to be like, yes. But that was the state. That was the man silencing him. Now when it's the culture silencing you, now it's different. The comedians lost their backbone. So, yeah, that's all I have on comedy. But it's an important thing. I think comedy teaches us a lot. And it's sad to see where it's going. I think that the more that it gets pushed, though, it'll reach a breaking point, is my prediction. And that people will... You already start to see it, by the way. I saw Paul Joseph Watson put out a video about TikTok, which I had no idea what TikTok is. But it's like some app. To me, it sounds like it was like Vines, which I never did Vines either. But the idea is you could do like a little 15-second video or something. And... See, millennials are way left-wing. And this guy I was talking about earlier, Jonathan Haidt, I'm reading his book, and he talks a lot about this as well, where it's like, we're starting to see something completely different, where millennials are the first, how does he put it? It's the first, now that we're seeing them in college, it's the first time that people have taken victimhood, like, clinically. Like, they start to use clinical terms to define their victimhood, and the amount of people has shot up. We've never really seen that, and it's because there's tons of reasons, but, social media when they were kids and things like that, which is unique, and so we're starting to see a lot of this different stuff. Well, there's a lot of evidence to show that Generation Z, I think they're calling it, which is the generation after that, is backlashing against the millennials, and they're going the other way. And so, like, when they're talking about TikTok, there's all these articles now, it's like, TikTok, it's the bastion of white supremacy. All this offensive stuff goes on TikTok. And it's basically people trolling. It's like 4chan type stuff, except they're making fun of, like, feminism. Like, they're making fun of songs that were, like, that a feminist would do, or a meme that a feminist would do. And they rework it to be like, shouldn't you be in the kitchen making me a sandwich? And some girl's like, oh, yeah. And stuff like that. Or making fun of, like, race and stuff like that. Like, a black guy will make fun of himself for being a black guy. Things like that. it's a rejection because they feel like they've been censored and silenced, just like every kid, like you used to be the what was the name of the show? It wasn't Who's the Boss, where Michael J. Fox was like the Republican kid and his parents were the hippies, It's like the younger generation's always rebelling in some way against the generation before it. And the pendulum's swung so much to political correctness, so much to this social justice warrior stuff, that there's just this almost kind of like gut rebelling from the younger people that are growing up with that. Like, I don't want this. This sucks. So I'm optimistic. Hopefully the pendulum swung so far that it's starting to swing back when it comes to comedy and things like that. That almost rhymed. That sounded like a haiku or something. Yeah, so that's all I really had for today, unless anyone has anything specific. My buddy Drone Tech was on here. I don't know if he's still here, but yeah, he was nice enough to let me come on and do a video with him yesterday. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope that it went well. I had a lot of fun doing it, and we'll probably work together in some time in the future. But you should definitely check his channel out. You see his name there in the chat. And yeah, his channel's worth checking out. He does a lot of great stuff on the media and their bias. And yeah, so it's worth checking out. Does anyone have anything else? If not, I'll probably be heading out. I should probably clean my house a little while my wife's at work. Though sometimes she's one of the people watching, so I can't be like, oh, I spent 3 hours cleaning. She'll be like, yeah, I watched you for an hour and a half while I was at work. So I got to be careful with how I'm exaggerating what I did. But all right, well, hey, thanks everyone. I'm going to be trying to put videos out daily. If you like this, please, as always, like and subscribe. Recommend me to some other people if you would. And yeah, thanks a lot, as always, everyone. Have a good one.